Hello, stream. Hey, what's up, Dr. Serb? First, indeed. Chapter 23. Oh, nice. Hey, what's up, Felix? All right, here we go. Chapter 23. By the time they arrived, the manor had already been attacked. They paused a street away, surveying the place. Soldiers wearing palace uniforms swarmed in and out, but they did not move with any great hurry. Whatever fight they had found within Yushan's home, it was already over. "We could try to sneak in," said she, "and mayhap the walls can be climbed. If we attack quickly, we could fight our way through," said Uzo. "No," said Lauren. "Until they abandon Yushan's home, we cannot safely approach. We must find another place to hide, an inn, or..." A boot scuffed on a cobblestone behind them. As one they turned, weapons out, but Lauren froze when she saw Joe. "Come with me," said the bodyguard. He had a bandage around his forehead and blood stained the left side of it, a new scar to go with the larger one across his scalp. "His Grace is alive. We got him out in time." "Will Yerrin answer the vision question?" "No." "It will only give you more questions." Without a word, he turned and headed off down the street. Lauren motioned the others forwards to follow him and quickly stepped up beside Joe. "What of the others? Annis. Is Annis all right?" "The Yerrin girl is with us, and His Excellency escaped," said Joe gruffly. "But Yushan, she fell." He bowed his head for a moment. Lauren's steps faltered. Hey, Lauren. And she had to force herself to resume Joe's rushing pace. Yushan had taken them all in at great risk to herself, but she had gone further. She had shown them kindness and hospitality like few people Lauren had met in her travels. It was only by her bravery that June had survived this long. Then Lauren realized that the area they were in looked familiar. She peered around trying to place it. At last it came to her. They were near the warehouse where they had met with Duras. The warehouse, said Lauren. Joe, it is not safe here. That is how Damaris found us in the first place. We guessed that, said Joe. There was a guard nearby watching the place to warn her master if we returned. His scowl deepened. But I found her, and now she will deliver no warning. Soon they found the warehouse, and Joe led them around to the back door. He knocked, and a guard opened it. Lauren entered to find them all. Hey, Nicole! Oh, I hear that, Lauren. He knocked and a guard opened it. Lauren entered to find them all there, King June sitting on a crate like it was his new throne, and Senlin at his side like always. But there, too, was Annis. She leaped up from where she had been sitting on the floor against a barrel. Lauren, she cried. Lauren leaped forwards, wrapping her arms around the girl. She said nothing, only holding her close for a moment. I was afraid you would not return. Annis's voice was thick with tears. I always will, said Lauren. Are you all right? Were you hurt? Annis pulled away, shaking her head and swiping at her eyes. No, we were able to get out in time. Some of Yushan's guards held them off while we made our escape. She turned to Jem. He stood back for a moment, unsure. Annis waved her hands impatiently. Oh, come here, you idiot. She dragged him into a hug. Yay for D&D. I'm alive as well, though it pains me that you did not care enough to ask. Wile's voice surprised Lauren, and she looked up to see him waving from one of the room's corners. He gave her a wide smile, but Lauren thought it looked somewhat forced. Lauren went to him. He stood, and she extended a hand to grip his wrist. I am glad to see you whole. I am glad to be so, said Weil, and I suppose it is good as well that you made it back safely. Good business partners are hard enough to find. She smiled and then left him to go to June. The king inclined his head gravely at her approach. Nightblade, he said, were you successful? No, your grace, said Lauren. Damaris predicted our plan. We could not find the mage stones, and when we realized you were in danger, we left. June frowned. You should have remained and carried out your mission. My soldiers saw me to safety, but now we will have to make another attempt on the treasury. It will be harder next time. Lauren shook her head. This warehouse is not safe, your grace. It is a half measure, and we must get you out of the city at once. The king's face grew stern. I have told you I will not leave my capital. But Joe stepped forwards to stand beside Lauren. Hey, what's up, Dredd? You must, your grace. My duty is to keep you safe, and I can no longer do so in Danfon. Finding Yushan was a stroke of luck, but she is gone now, and we have nowhere else to hide. The Nightblade is right. Though I slew one guard, it is only a matter of time before more come. Then let me reveal myself, said June, standing suddenly. Joe and the other bodyguards dropped to one knee, though Lauren remained standing. The people will join me. They will not, your grace. Lauren spoke flatly, keeping all anger from her voice, no matter how great a fool she thought the king was acting. Not before Wojin musters his army, which he is paying, not you, to have you cut down. Some loyal soldiers may rally to your side, but they will die. June opened his mouth as if to reply, but before he could, Senlin shot to his feet. Listen to her, father. You have made your play, and it was brave. It might even have worked, but Wojin knows you. He knows you will, forgive me, but you will use more bravery than wits when you fight him. He is counting on it. You must survive, or there is no hope for the kingdom. The king stopped short, turning to look at his son. Lauren saw his expression soften, and his eyes looked almost mournful. After a long moment, he turned back to them. Take my son, he said. You can remove him to safety, even if I fail. You will fail, said Lauren. Forgive me for speaking so plainly, your grace, but I serve the High King, not you. It is vital to her war effort that you are alive and on her side. You have no army, and now that Duras has been caught and murdered, none of the senators will join you. June turned to look at Senlin once more, and Lauren saw the fight leave him all at once. He sat back down, seeming to sag on top of the box, but the moment of weakness passed. He straightened his back, lifting his head to regard her. Slowly, Joe and the other guards got back to their feet. Very well, Nightblade, he said, I will yield to your counsel. The High King is my liege lord, and I will do what is best for her, and I will see my son to safety as well. Lauren sighed with relief, though she tried to hide it. I am glad to hear it, your grace. She turned and beckoned Weil forwards. We need to get out of the city at once. Can you lead us? Sky above, yes, said Weil. I only wish you had asked me sooner. Lauren nodded and turned to Joe. Ready yourselves to leave. We will be out of the city before the day's end. It was a sorrowful and bedraggled party. How many chapters in? We're on chapter 23. It was a sorrowful and bedraggled party that followed Weil into the sewers. Yeep. There we go. There were only 2 royal guards left aside from Joe, and that put their number at 13. It's a long chapter. I think we split it up a little bit. Yay, Lauren. Tech support for the win. It was a sorrowful and bedraggled party that followed Weil into the sewers. There were only 2 royal guards left aside from Joe, and that put their number at 13. Lauren had traveled many lands with only her friends beside her, and so it should have felt like a large group, but they walked beneath a city surrounded by enemies, one of whom had an entire army at his command. Against so many, 13 felt useless. At least 13 is a number of fortune, thought Lauren. Mayhap that is a good omen, but she could not quite make herself believe it. Soon Lauren was as lost in the sewers as she had been on their way in. Every tunnel and intersection looked the same. Occasionally there was a short slope taking them up or down, but that was the only difference in the midst of their long, trudging walk. But Weil clearly knew where he was going. The smuggler never paused, turning at once every time they came to a branching in the tunnels. Carrie dropped back to walk beside Lauren. How can he know where we are? She whispered. Everything looks the same to me. Lauren shrugged. He knows the place well, the same way you know the streets of the city. Yet the city is made up of buildings. They look different. Down here it is just the same dreary stone walls over and over again. You may see it that way, said Lauren, but Weil sees it differently. I come from a forest. If you were to visit it, you would likely think that every tree looks the same. But I knew every tree in the woods surrounding my home, and even when I passed beyond the places I knew by heart, I knew the signs to look for, where moss grew on trees and the way certain plants leaned to catch the light. But when I came to a city for the first time, I was hopelessly lost because every building looked like every other. Carrie nodded slowly. I suppose I can see the truth of that. Weil spoke suddenly from ahead of them. We are almost at the end, and forgive me for saying so, Your Grace, but not a moment too soon. I should like a very long rest after this is all over. June did not deign to answer, but Lauren smiled to herself. She could faintly hear a sound ahead of them, a murmuring, lapping noise, running water. They were near the river. Her dream sight struck her, and her step stumbled. She had been near the river in her dream, when she had seen Damaris and Gregor and Duras tied to the chair, dying, when she had heard Duras whisper the words, "Never again will June sit the Dortian throne." Lauren reached out, grasping, though she did not know what she was looking for. Her hand came down on Annis's arm, and she gripped it tight. The girl stopped and looked up at her in concern. "What is it, Lauren?" "We are in danger," whispered Lauren. I think it is a trap." Annis froze, looking down the tunnel. The others were a few paces ahead, and the gap was widening. Only Uzo was behind them, serving as a rear guard. He stopped short just behind Lauren, brow furrowing. "Nightblade?" he murmured, as Is everything all right? Lauren looked back down the way they had come. Have you seen anything? Uzo's frown deepened. Of course not. No one is behind us. Lauren broke into a run, heading for the front of the group. Weil was in the lead with Joe beside him. The king and prince were just behind. They all stopped at the sound of her footsteps, turning in alarm. Nightblade, said King June. What is it? Before she could answer, Wojan's soldiers attacked. Soldiers in palace uniforms came charging from a side tunnel up ahead. They screamed a battle cry, and the sound echoed from the walls until it was deafening. It struck all the party into inaction, and they stood for a moment, dumbfounded, as their foes approached, all but Joe and Shiun. They leaped to the fore, weapons ready. Shiun caught Weil by the collar and threw him backwards towards the others before she drew an arrow and fired. The shaft sped true, plunging into the chest of one of the soldiers. It pierced the chain, and the woman went down with a scream. That broke the spell. June's other bodyguards mustered themselves and joined their commander with a cry. June's other bodyguards mustered themselves and joined the commander with a cry. Thankfully, the tunnel was narrow enough that the three of them could hold off the enemy fairly well, and even better once Uzo came forwards to aid them. The mystic's spear was shorter than most, but it was longer than the swords of their enemies, and he used it to deadly effect, thrusting and withdrawing over and over again as his foes struggled to reach him. But past the fighting, Lauren could see a figure that towered over the palace guards. There was a light farther down the tunnel, and it put him in silhouette. There was no mistaking the breadth of his shoulders, the power in his arms, the way he always loomed over me from the doorway in his chambers, thought Lauren. And even shrouded in darkness, she could see the hateful glint in his eyes. Gregor was here. Lauren's limbs shook. The dream sight left her nearly unable to move, but somehow she stumbled forward, seizing King June's arm. He jumped at her touch. Your Grace, she could barely force the words out. We must get you away. The way out is through them, he said. For the first time, she heard true fear in his voice. Now he was in the midst of a battle, not planning one from afar. But Lauren could not take pleasure in his sudden terror, not now, not while her friends' lives were in danger. We cannot get out that way, said Lauren. We must go back to the city. Without waiting for him to answer, she dragged him away from the fighting. Joe and the others were being forced back slowly. Lauren had a feeling that would happen much more quickly once Gregor finally reached the fray. For now, the giant seemed content to press forwards at a measured pace, taking his time. Why is he not attacking, thought Lauren. He must see that I am escaping with the king. More cries sounded out, not towards the fighting, but from behind them. Lauren froze. From the tunnel leading back to the city, Lauren saw more palace soldiers come charging at her. No, they were surrounded. There would be no escape. Her dreams had been wrong all along, or she had misunderstood them. She would not fight Gregor within the palace. He was here for her now. All her decisions had led to him in the end. The soldiers were coming. They were only a few paces away. Shiun had fallen back, placing herself between Lauren and the approaching Yerrins. Jem was by her side, his sword held forth, terror in his eyes. Annis clung to Lauren's arm. And yet, her dreams had shown her more than just Gregor. She looked around, seeking something. Did she know this place? Had she seen it? The man in black had taken her here, and once he had her here... Yes, there was a small opening. It did not even look like another tunnel, just an alcove, but she had seen it before. To me, she cried, putting every bit of her strength into it. For a moment it seemed that the fighting paused and her friends glanced back at her. To me, she cried again and dived into the alcove. It opened up into a small side tunnel, just as Lauren had known it would. She followed it, dragging June behind her, and he pulling Senlin. Behind, the others followed one by one. Lauren glanced back, squinting to see in the dim light. Joe and one guard were the last to enter the tunnel. The other guard shoved his commander on and turned, holding the alcove against pursuit. Lauren pressed on. Soon the side tunnel opened into a wider one. It was clear, but Lauren could still hear soldiers shouting. They would wrap around soon and find Lauren again. We have to keep moving, she cried. Taking her own advice, she pulled June further down the tunnel. She thought she remembered it now. She only had to keep going this way until bent grate left. She saw it, sticking out of the wall just as it had in her dream. She turned left and pressed down the tunnel. How do you know where we are? Said June. It is enough that I do, said Lauren. Do not stop. Suddenly footsteps. Too close. Lauren turned, but not fast enough. Gregor came charging from a side tunnel. Lauren did not see any other Yerrin soldiers with him, but he did not need them. One ham-sized fist crashed into Prince Senlin. The boy flew across the sewer, striking the wall opposite. He slumped to the ground. Most of them cried out, but King June was loudest. Yay for stretching. Keep that body moving. Very important. Before Lauren could react, he ripped his arm from her grip and attacked. He had no weapon, but then Gregor had not drawn his own yet. Mayhap June thought he did not need one. Gregor seized the king by the throat. His fingers wrapped all the way around the back of June's neck, and he squeezed. Jem had fallen on his knees by Senlin's side, weeping. He lifted the boy up into his arms, trying to pull him out of the muck. But then Senlin coughed. Lauren stared in amazement. The boy lived. Joe cried out and attacked Gregor, who still held the king. Joe's sword came flashing down, but Gregor moved faster than a blink, and drew his own weapon. It licked forth, parrying Joe's strike, and then Gregor's foot lashed out. It struck Joe in the chest, and Lauren heard ribs crack. The bodyguard grunted as he fell on his back. Shion had moved to get a clear shot, and now she fired. The arrow pierced Gregor's arm through, but the giant did not even react. "Stop!" cried Annis. "Gregor, stop! I command you." It was a desperate ploy, and it did not work, and now Gregor's sword was free. He slammed June into the wall and plunged his blade into the king's chest. Such was the force of his blow that the sword pierced the stone wall behind him. June jerked, and then his whole body went limp at once. Carrie screamed, the piercing echo of it rebounding from the stone walls in a chorus. Lauren found herself by Jem's side, though she had not remembered moving there. She was helping him up, helping Prince Senlin as well. She was pulling them back, away from the giant. Come, we must flee," she said. "We must flee." "All right, later, Dred. Thanks for dropping by. Good to see you." Where was Chet? She saw him now, standing in support of Uzo, but a step back, his limbs shaking. It seemed he might drop his staff at any moment. Uzo's spear was steady, however, as he advanced on Gregor. Shion was behind him, knocking another arrow. She loosed it, but this time Gregor saw it coming. He dodged, and the shot went wide. Gregor attacked again. Uzo expected him to use his sword to deflect the spear. Gregor caught the spear in one fist instead. His sword came from the other side, and it almost caught Uzo in the neck, but the spearman released his weapon and tumbled backwards. Shion loosed another arrow. It hit Gregor's chest, but his armor repelled it. Gregor flipped the spear around and threw it at her. Shion dodged, but too slow. The spear struck her in the side. It did not run her through, but the sudden weight of it made her pitch forwards onto the ground. Sky above, no, thought Lauren. Her hand tightened on the handle of her dagger. Something coursed through her. Not courage, not fear, fury. She readied herself. Gregor was still distracted by Uzo and Chet. She could... More battle cries sounded. The fury guttered in Lauren's heart as she turned. More guards? Lauren could not even defeat Gregor on her own, if his soldiers had arrived to help him. Dreamsight froze her in place as red cloaks flooded down the tunnel towards them. Mystics. Lauren could hardly move. Her anger was gone, replaced by the terror of Dreamsight. There was Cal, just as she had seen him, charging at the head of his soldiers. A rage was in their voices as well as their eyes, and they had drawn their swords. But they were not charging at Lauren as they had in her dream. They scarcely seemed to notice her. They ran straight past her and attacked Gregor. The giant was forced back step by step. In moments he had retreated down the same side tunnel from which he had appeared. Senlin was on his feet now, and Lauren looked at him. She tried to ignore her own shaking hand. "Your Excellency," she said, "are you all right?" "Yes," he said, shaking his head. "I was only stunned for a moment. His words choked off as he stared. Lauren followed his gaze. There was his father, still slumped against the other side of the tunnel. Lauren stepped in front of him. "Your Excellency." "No," he whispered. "No, father." Lauren tried to think what she could say, what words would convince him to move, but before she could, a rough hand seized her shoulder and hauled her around. She found herself face to face with Cal. The Grand Chancellor's expression was a mask of carefully contained rage. Lauren could sense it in the way his eyes flashed, the way his fingers squeezed down on her shoulder. "Eh? Hold the phone? What phone? Which phone? This phone?" "I'm holding it. What do you want me to do now?" "Today is Meg's birthday, yes." His red cloak was wet in places. I don't know that emoji. Feels birthday man. That's amazing. Yeah, I spent the morning spoiling her and helping her make made a breakfast in bed and whatnot. And she is now out at a little get-together with some friends with the kids. I would be there, but she told me that what she wanted for her birthday was for me to finish the book. His red cloak was wet in places, and Lauren realized his fight had begun long before he found her little party here in the sewers. "Girl," growled Cal, "get your misfits out of here. Follow Jormund." Jormund, thought Lauren, and then the big man was there, tall and wide, though nowhere near so large as Gregor. The mystic appeared. Tall and wide, though nowhere near so large as Gregor, the mystic appeared from behind Cal as if by a spell. He gave her a brief smile, though there was a grimness to it that looked strange on his jovial face. "Out of the sewers," said Cal, "now." Then he turned and joined his mystics in the fight. More screams told Lauren that the rest of the palace guards had found them, and the sewers were now home to a pitched battle. Senlin pressed forwards, trying to reach his father, but Lauren and Jem held his arms, drawing him away. He fought them, but then Carrie swept in, and she took Senlin into her arms. "Your Excellency," murmured Carrie, "he is dead. I am sorry, but you must go on. We must get you out of here." Uzo and Chet joined them, and they had Shion slung over their shoulders. At first Lauren thought someone had pulled Uzo's spear from her, but then she saw wood protruding from the wound. It must have broken when she fell. Chet's face was elf-white, and his eyes were skittish. "Joe," said Lauren. Uzo glanced back. "I did not see him." "Go to him," grunted Shion. Her gaze drifted, going here and there. Lauren thought she must be in shock. "I am useless anyway. Leave me here. One of the others can haul me out." "Stop talking," said Lauren, more sharply than she had intended. "We are not leaving you here. Jormund, go find the king's bodyguard. If he is alive, we need to bring him." Jormund seemed a bit taken aback, but after a moment he went to do what she said. Shion laughed, though her eyes still wandered. Good, commander." "Save your breath," said Lauren. Jormund soon reappeared. Joe was breathing but unconscious, and Jormund had lifted the bodyguard over one shoulder. Now he and a squadron of 8 more mystics escorted Lauren and her friends through the sewers. They pressed on the way Lauren had been leading them before the attack. Soon enough she saw a bronze plate set in the ceiling. "Bronze plate, right." "Turn right," she said. They obeyed without question, though Jem and Annis gave her odd looks. Chet was not looking at anything at all. Lauren grew more worried about him. He seemed on the verge of collapse. "Let me take her," she said. "Turn right," she said. Lyle frowned. "That way does not lead to—" "I said right," Lauren said. She pressed on, ignoring the smuggler. The rest of them followed her after only a moment, with Jem and Annis giving her odd looks. But Chet was not looking at anything at all. Lauren was growing worried. He seemed on the verge of collapse. "Let me take her," she said. She lifted Shion's arm from Chet's shoulders and draped it across her own. Chet did not even try to argue, but only followed along, mute. Soon they reached the door that Lauren knew she would find. Jormund set Joe down and rammed his powerful shoulder against the door, but it did not budge. "You will need my help," Lauren said quietly. After all, the man in black had needed it in her dream. "Jem?" The boy had been walking with Prince Senlin, consoling him, but he came to take Shion's arm as Lauren helped Jormund with the door. It opened, and Lauren was struck by the smell of sweet, fresh air. "It's a good thing you learned the sewers while you were here," grunted Jormund. "We would have had another fight if we had gone the way I planned." "A good thing indeed," said Lauren. She did not meet his eyes as she led the party back into Danfon. Chapter 24. 23 done, by the way. Oh no, this is now chapter 25. Haha. Because I reorganized the chapters slightly. You know what, I'm just going to spit out a new ebook real quick. Because otherwise I'm going to be very confused.
Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you so much, Nicole. You're awesome. Oh man, that's amazing. I will pass on the birthday good wishes to Meg. Not in that way. Not a euphemism. Not a... Are we on chapter 25? Chapter 25. Lauren's party hurried through the city following Jormund's direction. Now that they were out of immediate danger, Lauren found herself wondering at the man's presence. She had no idea how Cal had found them there beneath the city, but she was even more confused that he would bring Jormund with him. The large mystic had been in Lauren's party when she searched for Damaris in the kingdom of Feldamar, and she had sent him back to Cal with, in essence, a message that she was disobeying orders. She had half expected Cal to station Jormund in some remote outpost in an outland kingdom, certainly not to bring him along on a rescue mission. But there was no time for a reunion now, and Lauren doubted their meeting would have held much cheer in any case. King June was dead. They had managed to rescue Senlin, but this was still a disastrous blow. The renewed purpose she had found in Danfon seemed to have fled. What were they doing here? What could they do? The city seemed lost, and now they could not escape it. The terror of their situation wrapped around her like a shroud, threatening to choke her. The others seemed to feel the same, but Chet was taking it harder than any of them. As they walked, he kept looking wildly in every direction. At any sudden sound, he jumped. The rest of them were trying to maintain at least some semblance of discretion, though that was hard with their wounds and the filth from the sewer that still covered them. But Chet was like a signal fire to any observer that something was wrong. "Chet," said Lauren quietly, "you must calm yourself. You will draw too much attention." He did not answer. She was not certain he had heard her. After what felt like an eternity, Jormund stopped outside a tavern. There was a door in the side, and he opened it to reveal a short staircase leading down to the cellar. Lauren and Uzo hauled Shiun down the steps behind him. There were many more mystics below, and several of them came forwards to help, pulling Shiun away from Lauren and Uzo to help her. "Chet!" The panic in Annis's voice made Lauren's heart skip, and she whirled as she heard a body hit the floorboards. Chet sat against the wall, hands balled to fists in front of his face. Lauren fell to her knees beside him. "Chet, what is it?" she said, her words fast with fear. "Were you wounded?" She tried to pry his arms away so she could see if he was bleeding anywhere, but Chet shrieked and drew away. "Do not touch me." Lauren fell back on her rear, hands raised. Her eyes smarted as tears sprang into them. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I'm sorry. Are you hurt?" It was as if he could not hear. He took deep, heaving breaths, his chest rising and falling like ocean waves. Suddenly he turned and vomited on the floor. "Here," said Jem. The boy knelt by Chet, pounding him on the back. Chet groaned and heaved again, but nothing came out. "Here, you are all right." Jem spoke softly, gently. It reminded Lauren of the sewers of Cabris, where he had used soothing words with Annis, trying to coax her out of her fear. He stroked Chet's back gently. "Get up, girl." Cal's growl drew Lauren back to herself, and she shot to her feet. The Grand Chancellor stood before her, though she had not heard him enter. She was a few fingers taller than he, but she did not feel it now. His eyes blazed with fury, and their long flight since the sewers had not quenched his rage in the least. His nostrils flared in and out with each breath. She half expected him to spit in her eye. "I have had it far past the bounds of patience with you," he said. "Darkness take the first day you came to Ammon. If I had known what a fool, what an incomprehensible idiot the High King had sent me, I would have sent you back to the Seed on the first available ship. You spurned my orders to hunt Rogan, you pursued Damaris and then lost her, and now an entire kingdom has joined the rebellion because of you." Shame had flooded Lauren from the moment she saw Cal. She had been living with it ever since, even before they came to Dorsey, where she chased Damaris across the kingdom of Feldamar, and during all their pursuit she had shoved that shame away, thinking that she could assuage it if she could only complete her mission before Cal found her, as he must surely mean to do. But she had failed, and now he was here. Yet even in the depths of her embarrassment, anger rose in her breast at his words now. "That was not my doing," she found herself saying, almost before she could think to form the words. "Damaris clearly set this in motion a long time "Be silent," he roared, loud enough to shake the walls. And Lauren obeyed. His was the voice of a battlefield commander, and it held incredible power when he was this close. Her legs grew so weak that she was surprised she could still stand. "Do you think me a fool? I know the Dorsan rebellion was not undertaken overnight. Indeed, I heard rumors months ago that such an action might be afoot. Do you know why Damaris thought she could pull it off?" Lauren did not answer. She did not trust herself to. "Because the mystics left Danfon. The moment I learned you would come into Dorsey in pursuit of Damaris, I sent word to the Grand Chancellor of the mystics in this kingdom. She pulled her soldiers out of the capital to find you and Damaris both, but that was just the opening the merchant needed. Now he did spit, a fat glob of phlegm that splashed on the floor next to her boot. The High King made a mistake the day she let you enter her service, but no greater than mine in never believing you were worthy of the honor." Tears had already been in Lauren's eyes. Now she could no longer restrain them, but she kept her face calm. Her lip did not tremble, and she did not sob. Thin drops merely leaked from the corners of her eyes, one at a time, racing to lay little tracks down her cheeks. She still could not bring herself to speak, and so it was with great relief that she heard Annis answer instead. "I do not know that that is the case, Grand Chancellor," she said slowly. "I know the mystic force that was once in this city. They would not have been significant enough to deter—" "You may shut your mouth as well," said Cal. He stepped past Lauren, dismissing her as he went to Annis. Now he did loom, for he was taller than the girl, but Annis kept her back straight and did not cower. "I knew from the moment I met her that Lauren was a naive thing, but I thought you had at least some glimmer of intelligence. Indeed, when I allowed you to go with her, I thought you might have some positive influence upon her. I suppose I should have known that it would be the other way around." The room grew deadly quiet. Annis's eyes sharpened. Not for the first time in recent days, Lauren thought she looked strikingly like her mother. "I told you this in Ammon," she said in an icy voice, "but you have never let me do anything, Cal. I have merely on occasion deigned to assist you in your efforts, but then I thought you were an honorable man. I am less convinced of that now." "Fuck him up, Annis!" "For all the good your help has done us," said Cal. "If we gained any advantage by your advice, it is lost. We managed 1 step forwards, but now we have taken 2 steps back." "Some very pretty dances begin that way," said Jem. The boy's mouth shut with a click of his teeth, his face going pale and his eyes widening. Quick as a landslide, Cal whirled on Jem and snatched him up by the tunic. Lauren stepped forwards to pull him away. "That is enough," cried Prince Senlin. Cal paused. The prince came from where he had stood in the corner. He wore a look of fury to match Cal's own, though his stance was a bit more composed. "Unhand him at once, Grand Chancellor. You have made your point and more, but if it were not for the Nightblade, I would surely be dead and Wojin's grip on Dorsey tighter than it is already. Whatever the Nightblade did before she and hers came to the capital is none of my business, but you are all in my kingdom now, and I am its rightful ruler. They serve me well, as they served my father, and they have my favor. If you care about restoring order and righting what wrongs have been done, you would do well to focus on that and stop this pointless ranting. You may think it does some good, but I am more inclined to believe it is only for your own pleasure." Jem stared at the prince with wide and worshipful eyes. Everyone else in the room had gone still. Lauren noticed Uzo looking at her, and the spearman arched an eyebrow. Lauren wondered if Cal would dare to turn his ire upon the prince, the king now, she supposed. After a long, scowling silence, Cal finally turned away. "Very well, your grace," he muttered, but his turn only made him face Lauren again. She stiffened. Cal thrust a finger at her, and though his voice returned to some semblance of normalcy, she could hear the barely contained fury lurking beneath it. "You are to take no action here. No action, not even the most insignificant, without telling me first. Anything more consequential than voiding your bowels requires my explicit approval. If you test me, I will pack you in a crate with straw and ship you back to the seat to answer to the High King herself. You will do nothing but what I tell you, and you will do that the moment the order passes my lips." Lauren felt a twisting, evil feeling inside her. She recognized the tone of Cal's voice, one full of threats both explicit and implicit, promising greater harm than he would willingly speak of in front of so many witnesses. It was the same tone her father had taken with her for most of her life, and she felt a part of herself closing off, just as she had with him. But Lauren was not the same girl who had left the Birchwood nearly a year ago. She felt a sense of rebellion in her heart that she had never been able to muster with her father. So while her expression grew neutral and her hands went entirely still, her heartbeat thudded louder in her ears, and she felt a burning desire to get away from this man, to disobey him, to defy him. She said only, "It will be my pleasure to do as you command, Grand Chancellor." Cal studied her eyes for a moment. What he saw there must have satisfied him if it did not entirely please him, for he nodded with a grunt. "Very well," he said. "Tell me everything you know, all that has taken place since you came to Dorsey, and especially what you have done here in the capital." Lauren glanced at Annis. The girl understood at once and stood beside her to help deliver the report. Together they gave a full account of all that had happened on their long road since Dahab. For his part, Cal listened and did not interrupt, for which Lauren was grateful. It made it easier to maintain the veneer of courtesy that had settled over her. She did not trust the anger in her heart. In one way she welcomed it, for it was a more powerful feeling than the weakness she had always felt in the presence of her parents. But she feared that if she unleashed it, it would come out in a storm that might irrevocably damage her already tenuous relations with the mystic and the precarious position of power she held. When they caught him up to the present moment, Cal stood for a long time, pulling his long beard, and thought, "That's too many longs, too close." Doobie-doobie-doop. Doobie-boo, doobie-bop-bo, ba-ba-da-dum-bum-bum. Ba-shooby-da-bop. When they caught him up to the present moment, Cal stood for a time, pulling his long beard, and thought. Lauren and Annis glanced briefly at each other. "Our objective seems clear," said Cal at last. "We must restore Prince Senlin to the throne as quickly as possible." "Very well," said Lauren. They had intended to flee the city, but Cal's objective seemed far more reasonable now that they had the mystic strength of arms. "How shall we do it?" Cal's scowl returned. "I shall determine that, and I shall call upon you if I decide I require your help. In the meantime, you and your friends have quarters here. Go to them and do not leave for any reason. And someone clean up her lover's sick before it stinks the whole place up beyond hope of cleansing." Lauren very nearly struck him, but she forced herself to remain civil for a moment longer at least. "As you wish, Grand Chancellor." She motioned to Jem, who helped Chet rise. Together with Annis, Carrie, and Weil, they left the basement. Chapter 25 done! It's chapter 26 time, chapter 26 time. Where you at? Where you at? They had been given 2 rooms with not quite enough beds between them. Lauren led them all into one, but Weil excused himself to the other, claiming he needed a moment to recover from their flight and their battle. Chet took little note of Weil's departure and collapsed on one of the beds. He rolled away from the others to face the wall, his arms wrapped around himself and his legs curled up. The rest of them sat morose in a circle in the room's opposite corner. None of them looked at each other, but only stared at the floor. Carrie was the least downcast among them, but even she seemed subdued, a far cry from her usual self. At last she seemed to muster some bit of humor, for she looked up with a little smirk. "That Cal certainly seems a pleasant fellow." Excuse me. Lauren barely managed a snort. Jem picked at the threads of his trousers with a fingernail. "Yes, mayhap that was an ill-timed quip," mumbled Carrie. "I'm stifled in this room," said Lauren. "I need to get some air." She got to her feet. Annis looked up at once. "I am not certain that is a good idea," she said carefully. "Because of Cal," said Lauren. "I could not care less what he thinks." "Thank you. I am a professioner, professioner, I am a professional belch performer, is what I was saying there. Those are words that I used. Author extraordinaire, everyone. Hey, I write words and edit them extensively. I do not just come up with them. But she could not stop herself from thoughts of her father. Always she had been quiet and compliant when he was nearby, when he was within striking distance. Rebellious thoughts had only come when he left her alone. Her current mood was far too similar, and it left a bitter taste of self-loathing in the back of her throat. "I am not the same girl who left the Birchwood," she told herself. "Cal will discover that, and soon." At least you should not go alone," said Annis. Lauren expected Jem to volunteer, but to her surprise, Carrie spoke up before the boy could. "I will accompany her," she said. I could use a moment's fresh air as well, especially after those sewers." She rose to her feet. Lauren gave her a grateful nod, which Carrie answered with a smile before following her out of the inn. They were on the ground floor of the inn. The hallway to the left led to the stairway down to the basement, and beyond that it bent around to reach the common room. But to the right it ran to the inn's back door. Apparently the innkeeper, whom Lauren had not yet met, was some contact of the mystics. She turned left and led Carrie to the back door and was pleasantly surprised to find Uzo there. "Uzo," said Lauren, "I'm surprised to find you on guard duty." "Certainly you did not expect me to be resting," said Uzo, giving her a little smile. "I half thought you might be imprisoned," said Lauren. "Cal may not know exactly how to deal with me, but you are one of his soldiers. He can punish you how he sees fit." "Yet I was only following orders," said Uzo, "or at least that is how the Ground Chancellor sees it. It is not due for a commander to punish his men for following the order of their officers." "I suppose not," said Lauren. She dropped her voice. "How is Shiyun?" "She is as well as can be expected," said Uzo. "Healers are tending to her, and she will live." "Good," said Lauren, relief flooding through her. She could not have borne it if she had gotten the woman killed. "Now, if you please, let us out." Uzo paused for a long moment, his mouth twisting. "Are you performing some errand for the Grand Chancellor? Because he told me that no one was to leave the tavern this way, particularly not you." Lauren's hands went to her hips. "I wonder, did Cal explicitly remove you from my command?" Uzo froze, and then his lips split in a broad grin. "I suppose he never did, at that. Then you had better let me through. In fact, I order you to do so. After all, a commander wants his soldiers to follow the orders of their officers, does he not?" Uzo looked towards the ceiling, hiding a smile. "So I have heard it said." He opened the door and stepped aside. Lauren gave him a grateful nod and left, closely followed by Carrie. Beyond the door was the inn's back alley. It held a large rack of barrels on their sides, several rows high. They likely contained ale, and there was a lowering mechanism to remove them when the innkeeper needed them. Lauren began to climb the rack towards the roof. Carrie paused for a moment, looking up at her with arms folded. "You are overly fond of rooftops, I feel," she groused. They are a wonderful place to get fresh air," said Lauren, "and that was what we came for, is it not? Come on." Carrie grumbled, but she followed Lauren up. Soon they sat on the edge of the inn's red tile roof, their feet hanging off into the empty air. It was nearly sundown, and the sky was a brilliant orange above them. Night's chill had not yet come, and the air was quite pleasant for winter. Lauren tilted her head back, breathing deep of the crisp, fresh breeze. A part of her realized that the rooftop was exposed, but the far greater part of her did not care. She would not remain cooped up in an inn where, even when he was not present, Cal loomed over her shoulder. Silence hung between the two of them as they watched the sun lower itself towards the mountains. In the end, Carrie broke the quiet, speaking carefully. "I would guess that you do not feel particularly proud of yourself right now." Lauren snorted. She thought of Cal's accusations that Damaris had escaped because of her, and that her actions had inadvertently led to Dorsey's capitulation. She was not entirely sure she believed it, but then again she had long ago accepted that such politics were far beyond her scope. "Not exactly," she said at last. "You should," said Carrie. "Cal is wrong." Slowly Lauren shook her head. "I do not think so. He may have overreacted. That has always been his way, but my actions were far from perfect." Carrie turned to her, and she did not move until Lauren at last turned to meet her gaze. "And do you think he is perfect? That he has never made an error? That he does not still make them even today? Everyone makes mistakes. Even if he is right, which I do not think he is, then he is at least complicit in your actions. If perfection is the goal, everyone is a failure." Lauren held Carrie's gaze for a moment, studying her dark brown eyes. It was Lauren who turned away first. Some failures are greater than others. Carrie let those words hang for a moment. When she spoke, it was not to argue. "My parents were healers. When I was growing up, I saw them tend to others. They would not refuse care to anyone, and countless souls came to us for poultices, to have wounds sewn shut or bones set. I told you already that I was sick of the way June began so many wars. Part of the reason was that I would have to see my parents face his casualties. True, we were always far from the battlefront, but some soldiers returned with lingering wounds, and other injuries were related to the war effort, those who made weapons or constructs of war. After a time, I began to feel that my parents were somehow to blame, at least in part. They never did anything to prevent the wars, though I suppose it was mad to think that they could. But even in doing their duty, they would heal people who would only go back out to join the war again. But in the end, I realized they had learned a lesson a long time ago, a lesson that I myself would not learn until later. It is the most important lesson of a healer, and it is something I have tried to keep in mind as I practice the art of the apothecary." Carrie fell silent. The air was growing colder, and she rubbed her hands together to warm them. Lauren knew it for a cheap tail-spinner's trick, but she could not help a smirk and a snort. "Oh, go on," she said. "What is the lesson?" Carrie smiled at her, but it was tinged with sadness. "Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes grave ones, but the people who do the most good in life are the ones who keep trying, not in penance for what they have done wrong, but because they wanted to do the right thing in the first place. Penance is no worthy goal, not truly. Misdeeds are inevitable, but if we only try to correct them, we forget all the good we can do in life. I have only known you a short while, and I do not know what you did before you came to Danfon, but from what I have seen, you always do your best, and you fail less often than you succeed. Cal may try to pretend that he is better than you, but if he does, he is a liar. She fell silent, and this time Lauren did not prod her to continue. Carrie's words echoed in her mind, a gentle counter-argument to the thoughts she had been plagued with ever since Yawamba. She did not know if she agreed with the girl. After all, though Carrie might be the same age as Lauren, she had not seen the things Lauren had. It was hard to feel that she was doing the right thing when the 9 kingdoms only seemed to slip further and further into chaos with every action. Lauren looked up at the mountains again, taking a deep breath and releasing it slowly. Then she pushed herself up from the roof. "Come," she said. "We had better leave. Cal might come to fetch us from our room, and if he finds me gone, he may have a conniption." Carrie snickered. "I know a medicine for that." But she followed Lauren down to the ground. All right, one more chapter before I take a break. Chapter 27. They slept fitfully that night. The day's battle had passed, but it had left its mark on all of them. Though she did not dream, Lauren shot awake more than once, thinking she heard the clash of steel in a sewer tunnel. Other times she woke at the sound of others stirring, coming suddenly awake with sharp cries. She heard the same thing through the wall in the next room, where Chet, Jem, and Weil slept. When morning finally came, mystics brought them food to break their fast. Lauren ate sparingly, not only because the food was much poorer than it had been in Yushan's manor, but also because her appetite had waned. She tried not to wonder if Cal would call upon her that day. If she had her way, she would have wasted no thought on the Grand Chancellor at all. After choking down all the food she could, she got up and went to the next room. The others were all awake, even Jem, to her surprise. He and Weil sat on the floor eating their own meal, though they looked little more interested in it than Lauren had been. But Chet was still on his bed, and Lauren did not think he had touched his plate. He sat leaning against the wall, hands clasped between his knees. He looked up at Lauren as she entered, his eyes like those of a corpse. "Weil, Jem," she said quietly, "might you leave us alone for a moment?" Jem glanced up at her, confused, but Weil, bless him, did not hesitate. He rose, beckoning for Jem to follow. As they left, Weil gave her a reassuring nod, but she scarcely saw it, for she never took her eyes from Chet's. The door closed behind her. She stood in perfect stillness for a moment. Then she crossed the room to sit on the bed with Chet, carefully placing herself near the foot of the bed to give him plenty of room. Yesterday, in a moment of forgetfulness, she had seized his arms. Now she would give herself no chance to repeat the mistake. Chet gave her a sad smile. "You know what I am thinking." Lauren shook her head slowly. "I do not take anything for granted. My dreams do not show me the future." Chet dropped his gaze to his hands. "This time they are right. I have to go." A long silence followed. Lauren did not speak, could not answer. She had expected it for days now, ever since her dream in Sidwan. She had known, yet the reality of Chet's words, the finality of them, left her breathless. The pain was not as sharp as when she had lost Jordell, but it was somehow deeper. After all, Jordell's parting had not been his choice. "I do not want to go," Chet began. "Only I cannot stop," said Lauren. "I understand. I told you in Feldemar. You never have to explain yourself. Not to me. I've always understood you, Chet. How could I not?" "Yet I must explain," said Chet, shaking his head. No bed shaking going on. Definitely a euphemism. I am breaking a vow. I made it to you and I made it to myself, and it demands that at least some excuse be made." "What excuse?" said Lauren. "You have suffered more than—" "Darkness take you, Lauren. Stop talking and let me speak." The words were neither harsh nor angry. They were desperate and pained, dragged from him as though each one agonized his throat. Lauren's voice choked off and her jaw worked to restrain a sob. "Giggity!" "Giggity command." "I thought I was brave enough," said Chet. "Or not brave, resilient. If I could not fully give myself to your mission, I thought I could at least endure it. Last long enough, at least, for this quest to be over. I have known for some time that I would have to abandon the war, but I thought I could help you catch Damaris, and then I could leave with my conscience not clear, but somewhat assuaged. Or I hoped you might tire of the chase in time, and then we could both go. But you seem tireless, and I can no longer keep the pace. Each day when I awake, I am breathless with the fear of death. Every night I fall asleep dreading that I shall never rise again. The terror creeps through me until I think it will stop my heart, and then until I wish it would. But this has been my plight since Dahab, and I kept on, but no longer. I see it now. I see that I endanger you all. I am weak. My courage will fail you at the worst time, and then your enemies. Do you see? I am not leaving for my sake, but for yours. I cannot follow you any more." I knew the dreams lied, Lauren thought. They always have. In them he said the opposite, but I was right all along. "I will get you a horse," she said, "for supplies. You have a mount outside the city, of course, but you should have a pack animal as well." "One horse is enough," said Chet. "Indeed, I never thought to own a horse in all my life. I do not know what I would do with two." "Take the second one," said Lauren. "It will make the journey easier. The birchwood lies not far to the south. There may still be shades in its western reaches. The High King has not yet driven them out. You should ride east for a while, but then you should be able to ride south and find home." Chet shook his head. Even now you trouble yourself over me. I do not want to be any more burden than I have already. Now it is your turn to be silent, Chet, said Lauren. You are not a burden, and you never will be. You have gone farther, done more than anyone else in my life. I may have ridden longer beside Annis or Jem, but they did not leave home to find me. They did not travel for many leagues, all alone, only to seek me out. They did not... She paused, forcing away the tightness in her throat. They did not help me survive the birchwood long enough to leave it in the first place. I pictured it often, stealing my parents' dagger, but instead of making off with it, plunging into my own heart. Sometimes the longing was so strong that I had to dig my nails into my own skin to prevent it. Only your friendship and, in time, your love turned me from the path. He was silent for a long moment before he whispered, You never told me that. There was much I never told you, and I still keep some secrets, but this I will say plainly to you, and to anyone else. You speak of me as if I am some great hero, and you only a weight that I bear. I do not argue your right to leave, but I will not let you speak ill of yourself. I will not even let you think ill of yourself. Sky above, Chet, you saved the life of the Lord Prince. You are a hero of the highest renown, and Underrealm does not deserve you. Lauren forgot herself again for a moment. Her hand crept for him, just for his foot, just to feel his skin again. But Chet drew the foot back as if she were a striking snake, and Lauren immediately withdrew. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, it is not you, he said. I still see. Forgive me. His tears broke at last, though Lauren's would not come. She shook her head. There's nothing to forgive. Chet sat weeping for a short while, his face buried in his hands. At last he raised his face, but when he spoke, his words were still broken by sobs. I wish that... I'll raise his face. I hope that after everything, if there isn't anything after all of this, I hope you will come and find me. I promise that I will, she said. I swear it. I do not know if it can ever be like it was before, said Chet, but I want to know the answer. We will, said Lauren, but you must promise me something as well. Promise that you will try, at least, to find happiness. I was never able to give it to you, but now I charge you with that as your only mission. Find happiness wherever it lies and cling to it. Fight for it and enjoy it as much as ever you are able, for my sake as well as your own. For your sake as well as my own, whispered Chet. I cannot imagine it, but I will try. Slowly he pushed himself up and off the bed. With cautious, tentative steps he walked towards the door. Lauren almost leaped up to embrace him, not because she had forgotten herself, but because who knew if she would ever have another chance. Indeed, some dark voice at the back of her mind seemed to promise that she would not. But she did not move. She did not even look up, for then she knew she would not be able to restrain herself. Instead, she only listened as he pulled on his boots and slipped out the door. Bump, bump, ba-da-da-da-dum, bump, ba-da-da-da-dum. Bum ba da 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 dum. All right, Nicole, thank you so much, and have an amazing D&D. Dwarves! Indeed, some dark voice at the back of her mind seemed to promise that she would not. Wait, she said. His footsteps stopped. Digging into the purse at her belt, she withdrew 20 gold weights, for the horse and for the rest of the journey home. She held the coins in an outstretched hand, still gazing at her folded legs. She did not look up, for then she knew she would not be able to restrain herself from trying to hold him, from begging him to stay. A long moment's silence stretched. He did not take the coins from her hand. Of course, she muttered. I forgot. She put the coins down on the edge of the bed and withdrew. From the corner of her eye she saw his hands collect them up. Then came the sounds of him slipping on his boots, leaving, and closing the door behind him. And then nothing. That is a much better ending to that scene. This book's going to fuck people up. I can't wait. I'm going to take a brief break. Back in a few.
whiz, whiz, bang.
Opa, opa, we're back. Oof. Okay, here we go. Woof. Oh, thank you for the thank you for the host, Erica. Sorry I missed that while I was on break. Chapter 28. Later that day, Cal summoned Lauren and Annis to his chamber. In the small room, he had put an even smaller desk. Unlike the one in his council room in Ammon, this desk had no map atop it. There was only a single goblet of wine. Lauren had no idea why he would have taken up so much of the room's limited space with the desk, except mayhap that it was a more impressive place for him to sit, subtly enhancing the impression he gave off as Lauren and Annis stood before him. Also in the room were Prince Senlin, King Senlin, Lauren reminded herself, and Joe, who was now the boy's bodyguard. That's funny. Joe wore no armor now, and bandages were wrapped thick around his torso. Lauren vividly remembered the sound of the man's ribs cracking when Gregor had kicked him, but Joe seemed determined not to let such injuries deter him from his duties. "I'm glad to see you well," Lauren told him as Annis closed the door. "And you, Nightblade," said Joe. "Enough of that," said Cal. He fixed Lauren with a look. "I noticed your lover left this morning." Lauren straightened, glaring down at him. She did not answer. "Is it safe to have him running around out there?" said Cal. "Can we trust him?" Lauren kept any rancor from a tone, but it was a near thing. "I trust him a far sight better than I trust you." Cal scowled at that, but when he answered, it was to change the subject. "I've been collecting information. Wojin did more than attack you in the sewer yesterday. At the same time, his soldiers rounded up those in the royal army who were loyal to June." Annis gave a little gasp. Lauren thought of Duris, the noblewoman who had offered to help them, and Marana, her daughter in the palace guard. Were they executed? "No," said Cal. "There were too many of them, and even if Wojin is a treacherous snake, he is no fool. So many murders would only stoke the flames of anger that still burn in the people of this city. The loyalists have been imprisoned. We will free them when we can, but it shall have to wait. I have a plan. We know, of course, that we cannot let Dorsey remain part of a rebellion. It is a grave danger to all the 9 kingdoms, not only because of Dorsey's military might, which is considerable, but because it could sway the minds of other kings who have yet to join the war. Dorsey had already allied itself with the High King, and then it changed sides. Moreover, Dorsey borders 5 of the 9 kingdoms. I know you never studied numbers, but that is more than half. Dulmoon could not have chosen a stronger ally." "Forgive me, Grand Chancellor, but we know this, and it has no effect on what we must do," said Annis. She had not lost all of her snippy tone from yesterday, being still angry at Cal for the way he had treated them. "You said you had a plan." Cal's jaw worked. "We must depose Wojin and restore King Senlin to the throne. You lot had concocted a plan to raise the army against him. It was complex and therefore doomed to fail. Much of that blame may be laid at your feet, I am sure, but I know, too, that King June was more honorable than he was practical. Meaning no disrespect to the dead, of course." He inclined his head at Senlin. The boy's mouth had set head in a grim line, but he nodded. In any case, said Cal, I mean to remove Wojin the old-fashioned way. Attack the palace with a small, determined group of soldiers and kill him. Lauren balked, but she kept her mouth shut. Annis, however, did not restrain herself. That seems a difficult task, to be sure. Difficult, said Cal? Yes, but we should be able to pull it off. The capital is in turmoil after the Nightblade's very foolish, very public display, the only good thing to come from your stupidity. Lauren's stomach did a turn, not at Cal's words, but at his intentions. He meant to assassinate a king, a false king, but one sitting a throne nevertheless. She did not think cold-blooded assassination fit within the mystic's purview, yet she knew it would be little use arguing with Cal about it now. The Grand Chancellor's mind was set, and he would no doubt relish the opportunity to dress Lauren down again. Off to the side, she could see that Senlin also looked deeply troubled. He had the same sense of honor as his father, and Lauren imagined he did not look favorably upon assassination. But he held his peace. Why should he not? Cal's plan would put him upon the throne. Cal noticed Lauren's hesitation. Enelin vowed that she would not force you to kill, he growled. I am required to respect that vow. But if you think I will follow your foolish rules, you are very much mistaken. Though I will not order you to deliver the killing blow, you will aid my soldiers in this. You have ruined enough already, and a kingdom is in chaos because of it. Lauren lifted her chin. Very well, I will help. That made Cal subside, at least for the moment. Good. And I've decided to grant you a boon as well. Once my men are inside the palace and have set about their work, you are to look for Damaris. You have chased her across 2 kingdoms. I doubt you will ever have a better chance to catch her. See if you can capture her. We will end Wojin tomorrow, certainly, but it would be better to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. He managed a grim smile. Or rather, since you cannot be bothered to dirty your hands, to kill 1 bird and stun the other. But Lauren barely heard his jibe. She could think only of Gregor, and of her dreams in which she saw him over and over again, in the palace of Danfon. I will do my best, said Lauren. Cal fixed her with a hard look. I expect you to do more than that. You will give every fiber of yourself to ensure this mission's success, as some small token of payment for your buffoonery so far. If you interfere in any way with my soldiers' mission to kill Wojin, I myself will ensure that the full weight of the king's law falls upon your head. Is that clear? Lauren kept her face as still as a mask of stone. It is clear. Cal grunted. Good. Now get out of my sight and ready yourself. Tomorrow we topple a king. A false one, it is true, but nonetheless it will be no mean feat. He waved them off, and together Lauren and Annis left the room. Chapter 28 done. Chapter 29. Lauren returned to their chambers and informed Jem and Carrie of the plan. Jem sat silently in the corner of the room, not looking at her. He had taken Chet's departure hard and refused to even say goodbye. When Lauren saw the look in his eyes, she could not help but be reminded of how he had been when Jordell died, but she forced herself to ignore it. If she spent too much time thinking of Chet's departure, she was not sure she would be able to go on. When she had finished outlining the plan, Jem finally spoke in a small voice. I'm ready to go whenever you are, and I will guide you, of course, said Carrie. Annis smiled ruefully. And I suppose I will remain here, again. Annis, said Lauren, frowning. You know that the girl's smile only broadened, and she waved a dismissive hand. Yes, I do know. I speak in jest, though I do so poorly. There's plenty to keep me occupied. I think I will meet with the new king. Likely he knows something of how to rebuild his court when he is in power, but I think I may be able to help him with some specifics. Jem looked at her with sudden interest sparking in his eyes. That is unfair. Why should you get to stay behind and have all the fun? Annis winked at him. I doubt you would call the planning of finances and court appointments fun, and if you did, I think you would only do so because of the company. You will do far better by Lauren's side, but I can put in a good word for you with the new king if you like. Blushing furiously, Jem began to pick at his fingernails. I do not know what you mean, he muttered darkly. Lauren smirked to see them jibing with each other again. It almost helped to remove the dark cloud of Chet's absence. But she noticed that Carrie did not join in the room's cheers. She sat completely still, and her gaze was far away. Carrie, said Lauren, what is it? Nothing, said Carrie quickly, looking up. Nothing, she sighed and shook her head. Oh, very well. I'm worried. We had one good moment in the beginning, taking Wojin completely by surprise, but ever since then he has outsmarted us at every turn, even when we tried to escape. It has nearly gotten us all killed, and it did get King June killed. Lauren nodded slowly. That is true, and sometimes I feel the same sense of foreboding, but this is a new situation. It was not Wojin who predicted our plans, but Damaris, who got her information by putting Duras to the question. But she has no one to turn to for information now, and Cal, whatever else he may be, is a cunning man. If he thinks this scheme will work, I am willing to try it. Annis and Jem frowned but did not speak, and privately Lauren wrestled with her own doubts. Did she truly think Cal was capable of outwitting Damaris? She would rather have relied upon Annis than the Grand Chancellor. The girl knew her mother better than anyone else. Lauren had a suspicion, even a fear, that she was only submitting to Cal's will because she no longer wanted to be the one in charge. Her choices had led to many deaths already. For the moment, at least, she was content to let someone else make those decisions. In the end, mayhap, she would find out at least whether or not all the killing could have been avoided, whether she was indeed the foolish girl Cal believed her to be, or if their foe was truly as devious as she feared. Cal spent the rest of that night and all the next day in hurried council. Joe and Senlin gave him much advice on the layout of the palace and the probable distribution of guard patrols. Cal even summoned Carrie at one point. She went, despite some reservations, and came back a short while later. Cal had wanted to know details about the servants' quarters and passages, which Senlin and Joe had been unfamiliar with. That may be a good thing, said Annis. I feared Cal might try a frontal assault. If he wants to know about the servants' passages, he may be trying for stealth, for as long as he can, at least. Mayhap, said Carrie, looking troubled, yet this all seems to be going so fast. He means to attack tonight. He has had scarcely more than a day to plan. He hopes to surprise Wojin, and Damaris, said Lauren. The more time we take to plan, the more time they have to guess our aim. In the afternoon, Lauren slipped away from the group to visit Shiyun. The scout had been put up in a room of her own, and 2 healers tended to her wound, one a mystic, the other not. Shiyun was awake when Lauren came, and she tried to push up on her elbows at once. Still yourself, said Lauren, even as one of the healers leaped forwards to hold Shiyun down. I only wanted to see how you were doing. There is a hole in my gut, said Shiyun. She tried to smirk, but only managed to grimace. Other than that, I could not be better. Her voice was tight with pain, and every other word came through gritted teeth. Lauren sat by her side, putting a hand over Shiyun's. She glanced up at the healers. Might we have a moment? They looked at each other apprehensively. The mystic healer, a stout woman with dark skin and many bags of medicine on her belt, wagged a finger. She is not to move for any reason. Of course, said Lauren. They nodded and withdrew. Shiyun regarded Lauren carefully for a moment. A thin veil of sweat covered her face, and Lauren guessed that her wound pained her much more than she wished to show. Some rumors have reached me, said Shiyun, about words the Grand Chancellor had with you. Let us not speak of that, said Lauren. It is nothing you should worry yourself over, and I will not apologize for the events that led to your injury, for I know you would not want to hear it. Certainly not, said Shiyun with a snort, but then why have you come here? I said I wanted to see if you were well, said Lauren. Then she blew a long sigh out through her nose. And I wanted to tell you that Chet left. We all rode many leagues together. I thought you ought to know. Shiyun's brows rose almost imperceptibly. I am sorry to hear that, though I suppose he was bound by no oath of duty. None of your friends are soldiers, not truly. No, they are not, said Lauren. I myself am not a soldier. Yet you are also not faithless. Lauren frowned and shook her head. Chet was not faithless. He did more than almost anyone else I have met in my travels. In time, if our road had been somewhat less dark, I think he would have become a great man and a great servant of the High King, a man somewhat like Jordell. You cannot be serious, said Shiyun. Do you think Jordell never walked any dark roads in all his journeys? That is what made him a great man. He never turned his course from the right one, no matter the pain it might bring him. Yet some pains are too deep, said Lauren. You know what happened at Uwamba. Actually, I do not know, said Shiyun. You never told us, but I guessed from the way things changed between you. Lauren gave her a hard look. If you guessed right, then you know better than to call Chet. Then you know better than to call Chet faithless. Shiyun met her stare for a moment, but at last she turned her eyes away. You are right. Forgive me. I suppose in my own way I am sad to see the lad go. And may I speak frankly for a moment? You may, said Lauren, smirking. Have you need to chastise me? Have I spoken too honestly with you, my underling, again? Not that, said Shiyun. Sometimes honesty is necessary, as it is now. I worry for what Chet's departure might mean for your own peace of mind. He was good for you. I know he needed to look after himself, but now I worry about who will look after you. Why, you will, of course, said Lauren. The moment you are healed and back up on your feet, I expect you to return to duty. Shiyun gave a loud snort, then winced in pain. I am hardly interested in providing the sort of comfort that Chet did, if you take my meaning. Lauren smiled and put her hand over Shiyun's. I am only joking. Do not worry about me, Shiyun. Worry only about getting well. A knock came at the door, and Lauren turned just as it opened. Jem poked his head in the door. "It is time. Cal has ordered the attack to begin," he said. His gaze slid past her to Shiyun. "How are you?" "You have both asked me that now," growled Shiyun. "I have a hole in my stomach, Master Urchin. I am hardly well, though I will not die." Jem grinned. "I am glad to hear it." Lauren gave Shiyun's hand a final squeeze and then followed Jem from the room. In the main chamber in the basement, she found her party of mystics ready to go. At their head, to her surprise, was Jormund. Lauren drew up short before him, looking around, but Cal was nowhere to be seen. "Are you to come with us for the attack?" said Lauren. "I am to lead it," said Jormund, giving her a grim nod. "I wish I had been with you in Uwamba, but I can make up for it now, at least in part." Lauren gave him a smile, but she knew it looked weak. What if he had been there in Uwamba? He might have died, as Weath had. She heard footsteps coming down the stairs and turned to see Cal enter the room. Close behind him were Carrie and Annis. Cal stopped short and scowled at Lauren. "I've put Jormund in charge," he said. "He is not unfamiliar with this sort of mission. You are to obey his every command just as you would with my own. Understood?" Lauren nodded. "I will. You have my word." Cal snorted. "The last time I thought I had your word, He bit the words off, but never mind that. "I would rather not be at odds with you, girl. Do your job now, and I will consider that a good first step." The hard wall Lauren had built up around herself softened, at least somewhat. She gave him another nod, and this time it was more genuine. "Then I will endeavor not to let you down." It was time to leave. Anna sprang forwards and gave Lauren a hug, and then Jem. It was the first time in a long time that Lauren had seen them share an open embrace without any awkwardness. "Take care of yourself, you great fool," said Annis. "And you," said Jem. Annis released him and motioned to Carrie, who started in surprise. "Come here," said Annis. "It is for good luck, I suppose." Over Annis's head, Carrie looked at Lauren with a little smile as the girl embraced her. Lauren returned it. The muscles in Cal's jaw kept spasming as though he longed to order an end to all this silliness, but he restrained himself. Then at last it was time to go. They followed Jormund and his squadron of mystics up the stairs leading to the street. A fine mist had come with the evening. Lauren took that as a good portent. A dark and misty night for dark deeds. She followed the red cloaks into the grayness. Chapter 30. Lauren sidled up beside Jormund as they walked. "What is your first order, oh my captain?" She tried to put an indifference in her tone that she did not feel. Jormund chuckled. "I am no captain, though who knows? If tonight goes well, the Grand Chancellor might promote me. But my first instruction is that, once we are inside the palace, you should avoid the fighting at all costs." "That is an order I can follow easily," said Lauren. Oh. Blip. "That is an order I can follow easily," said Lauren. "How do you mean to sneak into the palace? We climbed the wall last time." "And that is still the best way in, but they will surely have redoubled the guard," said Jormund. "Therefore we mean to make a feint at the front gate. When they are distracted there, the larger part of our group will enter the same way you did last time. Once we are inside, Caradon will lead us through the servants' passages to the king's quarters." Lauren frowned. "The main gate will be guarded. The mists will help, but surely they will see us when we try to make the climb." "We will be exposed. But we will not be climbing for very long," said Jormund, smiling. "Yond here is a mind mage." He pointed to a man by his side. Yond did not look quite like Lauren thought a wizard should. He was too short and wide for that. But he smiled at her and lifted a hand, and his eyes began to glow. A dagger flipped up out of Lauren's belt to spin in midair. "I shall get you on top of that wall quickly, girl." He had a voice like two stones grinding together. "I hope you can do your job after that." Lauren smiled at him, then plucked her dagger. Lauren smiled at him before plucking her dagger out of the air and sheathing it once more. Soon they reached the palace. A wide main road ran in front of the walls, and they stood in the shadows on either side. Mayhap 10 paces separated them from their target. 10 paces they would have to cross in the open air. Guards stood in the windows of the gatehouse and the towers, but there were also 2 guards on the street in front of the gate. The mist would help cover their approach, but they would be seen before they could sneak in. A thrill coursed through Lauren. It was the same feeling she had had just before they infiltrated and attacked Uwamba. She only hoped that the results would be somewhat better this time. "Time to begin," said Jormund. They attacked. 10 of the mystics stormed forwards, drawing their swords with Lauren and Jem close behind. They sounded no battle cries, and so the guards had not noticed them until they were almost to the wall. Then a cry went up. 4 guards from above loosed a volley of arrows, but Jan's eyes flashed. The arrows scattered in midair, clattering to the cobblestones. Then the red cloaks reached the soldiers on the street. With the benefit of surprise, the mystics slew their foes quickly. Each fell pierced by many swords. Jormund turned to Lauren and clasped his hands. "Boot," he grunted. Lauren placed her foot in his hands and leaped when he heaved. That sent her almost halfway up the wall, and then she felt an unseen force seize her under the arms. Jan's mind magic, she realized. The spell threw her the rest of the way so that she did not even need to grip the top of the wall, but flew neatly over it to land on the other side of the ramparts. One guard was on the wall just outside the tower, and she barely had time to look surprised before Lauren attacked. The woman bore only a bow, and she could do nothing to block Lauren's punch. 3 times Lauren struck, and the woman collapsed on the ground. Jormund landed just behind her. At once he slammed his shoulder into the door of the gatehouse. It flew open, leading into the upper floor. 5 guards waited inside. One raised a sword, but Lauren threw a dagger into his arm and then grappled with another. Jormund's sword flashed, felling 2 of them. Lauren's opponent tried to overpower her, but she threw a foot behind the woman's and pushed her back. The guard's head struck the wall, and she fell senseless to the floor. Jormund came to help after the first... Jormund's sword flashed. Jormund came to help after the first few wild swipes. His sword battered the other man's away, knocking it from his grip. Jormund plunged the blade through the man's chest, and he dropped. The gatehouse was clear. They ran to the wheels at either end. Jormund's meaty fists wrapped around the spokes, and he had the rear gate raised in only a few heartbeats. Lauren was slower, but he ran over to help her finish it. Soon the gates were up, and they heard shouting as the guards inside the courtyard realized the palace was exposed. By that time, 4 more mystics had made the climb, and they filed into the gatehouse. "Hold this place as long as you can," said Jormund, "but once you are sure it will fall, get out alive." The warriors moved to obey. 2 took up positions at the doors, while 2 others stood at arrow slits in the rear. They would be able to fire into the courtyard as the Dan Juan soldiers came to attack. "Our job here is done," said Jormund. "Now comes the greater task." He and Lauren took the stairs down and into the courtyard, immediately ducking through the gate and back out to the street. With a quick gesture, he motioned the rest of the mystics after him. There were 15 of them now, in addition to Lauren and her friends, and they made their way around to the same place where Lauren had infiltrated the palace last time. With the help of the mind mage, they made the climb far more quickly than they had before. No guards challenged them on the walls, for all had been summoned to fight at the front gate. They made their quick run across the side wall, and Lauren led them in their climb up to the balcony that would let them in. But this time the door was locked. "They have learned that much, at least," said Lauren. "Pah," said Jormund, grinning. "What good is a lock?" "Hey, what's up, Dread?" He rammed his massive shoulder into the door twice, and the jamb splintered as it flew open. They stormed into the palace, but now they turned the opposite direction from last time, for they were making for the servant passages. "Here," said Carrie. The girl's eyes were wide with fright, and her hand shook as she pointed out the right door, but her voice did not quiver. Lauren was impressed. Carrie had said she was fearful when Wojin attacked the palace, but she seemed to be handling this battle fairly well. Jormund threw open the door Carrie had pointed to. Inside was a manservant, but before he could cry out, Jormund's meaty fist struck him senseless. Carrie directed them through the passageway, turning left and right as they made their way towards the king's chambers. The plan of attack was brilliant, Lauren realized, for it would be almost impossible to find them here. They were in the walls of the palace itself, and all attention would be diverted to the front gate. If Wojin feared any attack, he would expect it to come from the palace's front hall. The servants' passages would put them only a few rooms away from the king's chambers, and while they would no doubt be guarded, they would have bypassed the greater strength of Wojin's forces. Indeed, even the servants' chambers were surprisingly empty. She supposed most of them must have gone to bed already, and the rest were likely hiding after hearing of the battle in the courtyard. At last, Carrie held up a hand. They all came to a stop in front of a simple wooden door, and Carrie turned to them. "This leads to the entrance to the keep," she said. "There is a small chamber and then a door, then stairs leading up into the keep itself, where the king's chambers will be found." "Good," said Jormund. "And the Yerrins? Once we climb the stairs, there is a passage leading away to the Yerrin apartment," said Carrie. "We will break off from the rest of you once we make the climb," said Lauren. "Very well," said Jormund. "If you have not returned by the time our deed is done, we will seek you out in case you need our aid." Excuse me. I would appreciate that, said Lauren, thinking of Gregor. She hoped that he would have been pulled away from Damaris' side by the fighting, but that seemed too fortunate to be true. Jormund nodded and threw open the door. They rushed out of the hallway into a small chamber with doors on either side. 2 guards stood before them, but they could barely draw their swords before the mystics fell upon them. In a moment the guards were slain, and Jormund opened the door to the stairwell. The stairs turned back and forth twice before emerging onto a landing before the king's chamber. Lauren saw the door leading to the side hallway. They all paused for half a moment. They all paused for half a moment, and Jormund turned to look at her. Good fortune, Nightblade, he said. I will see you again soon. Good fortune, said Lauren. She ran for the hallway door, carrying Jem on her heels, and threw it open. An arrow flew at her from the hallway beyond. Lauren dodged too late by reflex, but the arrow missed her anyway. She caught a glimpse of the hallway beyond. She caught a glimpse of soldiers in Dorshan livery, and then she fell to the floor on her back. Desperately, she kicked the door shut again. Jormund, she cried, wait! She was too late. She heard the door to the king's chamber burst open, and the mystics gave great cries as they stormed in. After them, said Lauren, pulling Carrie and Jem with her. They reached the door to the king's chamber not a moment too soon. Behind them, the hallway door burst open, and Dorshan soldiers charged in, screaming. The opposite door flew open as well, and more soldiers came running from the other side. Lauren leaped into the king's chambers, Jem and Carrie close behind her, and threw the doors shut. The chambers were empty. There was a wide bed against the opposite wall, with great windows on either side of it, and many chairs and couches for the king to receive guests. But Wojan was not here, nor were any of his household guards. Jormund stood spinning in the middle of the room, his sword drawn but impotent. It is empty, he said slowly. Jormund, said Lauren. Guards outside. Jormund ran to her, and several mystics followed. They put their shoulders against the door, leaning into the force of the soldiers beyond, who had begun to batter it. The bar, said Jormund. His outthrust finger pointed at a bar for the door. 2 of the mystics heaved it up and placed it in its iron fittings, and then the rest of them fell back. The pounding and shouting from outside redoubled. Yond eyed the door, his face grim. That will not hold long, he said. When it falls, we fight, said Jormund. Lauren could scarcely believe it, but a smile split his lips. I do not think they will expect a mind mage. Jormund, there are far too many of them, said Lauren. And where is Wojan? They knew, said Jem quietly. They guessed. Yes, said Jormund. His smile did not falter as he looked down at Lauren. Yes, we have been thoroughly outwitted. Even if we could guess where Wojan has been moved to, we could never reach him, and certainly we could not surprise him. Lauren frowned up at him. Then we must escape. A huge blow crashed against the door. It rocked on its hinges. Jormund shook his head. A few more strikes like that and they will be inside, and we'll never have enough time to get out. But you will. Take your friends and go. This is not the time for some foolish last stand, said Lauren. Your death will not help the war against Dorsey. There are windows. We could... Jormund only laughed. I told you, there's not enough time. You made your vow, Nightblade. You promised Cal you would obey me. Take Jem and Caradwyn and get out. He looked down at her suddenly, and his smile went from fierce to wistful. I may not have been in Yawamba, but this is not such a bad trade. I hope you will make sure they talk about me and my soldiers here, and whatever stories they might tell about all this. Another blow crashed against the door. A large crack appeared in the bar, holding it shut. Lauren bit her cheek until she could taste blood, fighting the stinging in her eyes. Darkness take you, Jormund. Of course I will. Then get out, you little twit. See to your friends. Stooping, he lifted a chair that must have weighed at least as much as Lauren, but which he hefted like a toy. He threw it through one of the chamber's wide windows. The explosion of splintering glass would have been deafening if Lauren had been able to focus on anything but the pounding at the door. Jormund reached out and ruffled Jem's hair, and then he took Lauren's shoulder and gave her a gentle push towards the window. She ran to them, pulling Carrie along behind her. They will die, said Carrie, sounding half senseless. Many have, said Lauren. Many more will. The elves told you, came a whisper in her mind, a memory of her dream. They told you. They called you Nightblade, the one who walks with death. Pieces of the puzzle, and always assembling themselves too late. There was no balcony outside the window, but there was a rooftop just a pace or two down. Lauren kicked out some of the glass at the bottom so that they would not cut themselves, and then she looked at Jem and Carrie. Each of them nodded in turn. She took one last look back. Jormund and his mystics had their shoulders against the door now. And Yond looked to be bracing them with mind magic. Jormund looked back at Lauren, still wearing his mad grin. A berserker's grin, she thought, like Naya. Is that why I saw her here in my dreams? Lauren turned and leaped. She came down hard on the tiles, Jem landing beside her a moment later. They both turned as Carrie made the leap, and Lauren did her best to catch the girl and soften her landing. Carrie was crying, but she did not hesitate as Lauren turned and led her off, running off down the rooftop. Behind them they heard a great crash of splintering timber, and then a chorus of battle cries rang out. Almost at once Lauren heard the sound of steel piercing flesh like a butcher's cleaver sinking into a side of beef. Above it all she heard Jormung's mighty shout, laughing as he cut down his foes, but the laughter faltered. One last cry he gave, and then fell silent a final time. They darted around the corner of the keep, and Lauren stuck her head back around it. No one had followed them out. She ducked out of sight again and looked about. The roof of the palace had many peaks and slopes that they could use to hide from sight. They stood in a sort of valley between two of the peaks, and a third was between them and the walls, blocking them from view. But they could not remain here forever. Their first goal... Oh, thanks for the follow, White Wolf Duckles. Welcome to the stream. Their first goal had to be finding a way out. There must be other walls, barricades like the one they had used to enter the palace in the first place, but Lauren could not see any from where they stood. Carrie, do you have any idea where to go from here? Said Lauren. The girl stood against the wall, her gaze distant. When she did not answer, Lauren put a hand on her shoulder. Carrie shook herself. Ah, what a Sean Connery again. Then seemed to think for a moment as though she was listening again to Lauren's words in her mind. No, she said at last. I know the palace, but not the rooftops. Jem? Lauren turned to the boy. I will search about, said Jem. He crouched and crept forwards, making for the slope closest to the outer wall. Lauren sat with Carrie, watching, heart in her throat. Jem poked his head up only far enough to peek with one eye, paused for a moment, and then slid back down towards them. Nothing easy that way, he said, and more bad news. The walls are now well guarded. I see many soldiers with bows. Lauren shook her head. There had been few guards when they infiltrated the palace. Wojin or Damaris must have commanded the guards to hide themselves until the mystics were inside. Then they would emerge, leaving Lauren and her friends trapped. Damaris outwitted us again, she said. No one is that clever, said Carrie, voice trembling. You do not know her very well, said Lauren, but then you do not know me very well either. We will escape this place alive, I swear it. Carrie nodded, and, despite her fear, Lauren could see that the girl wanted to believe her. She vowed to herself that she would not let her down, or Jem either, even if it cost her everything. Everything. Lauren froze where she sat. Realization came crashing down on her like a wave, robbing her of breath. For a moment it sapped her will, and she felt as if rising to her feet would be an impossible task, but she shook her head, clearing the feeling away. She knew what she must do. Carrie, she said, her voice wooden, where is the treasury from where we are? Carrie opened her mouth to answer, but Jem spoke first. I think I saw it just over that slope. It lies between us and the outer wall. We can reach its rooftop, but that ends a good 10 paces before the outer wall. We cannot use it to escape. Not the roof, said Lauren. Follow me. She crept up the slope and saw what Jem had described. Oh, thanks for... Find the time. Thanks for the follow, Find the Time. Yes, finding the time is rather important. The first job of any writer, or I guess anybody, really. From the peak, the roof ran down a short ways before ending. There was a small gap, easy to leap, and then the roof of the treasury. High on the treasury wall were windows, somewhat small but large enough to slip through. A pale light shone from within. Lanterns or torches were lit inside, but not many, mayhap even just one. That meant that if there were any guards below, they would be few. Follow me, said Lauren. Do not stop for anything. Lauren slid down the rooftop towards its lip. She kept a wary eye on the wall far beyond. I also have 3 kids, so I fully understand. Welcome to the stream, both of the new follows. Have a free book if you want one. Kept a wary eye on the wall far beyond, but the guards there had no hope of seeing them in the darkness. They carried torches, yes, but the light could never reach as far and would only keep the guards blind to the shadows. At the rooftop's edge, she did not stop herself. Instead, she jumped as hard as she could, curling and striking the window with her shoulder. The glass shattered easily under her weight, and she thrust out an arm to catch herself. It caught on the lip. She felt glass bite into her skin, but not deep. Most of it fell tinkling to the floor below. She hung there, breath hissing through her teeth against the pain in her hand. There below them was the treasury, seemingly endless piles of gold and silver, both coin and otherwise. The riches stretched from one wall to the other, but there were no guards to watch them. Only one figure waited for them down below. Even in the grip of the dream sight, Lauren's heart quailed. The figure was tied to a chair, its head hanging down, like Duras had been. But it was not Doris. She forced her thoughts back to the present and reached up, using the hilt of a dagger to knock away the rest of the glass from the bottom of the windowsill. Jem and Carrie would follow at any moment, and she did not want them to injure themselves. Then she fell, aiming for a shelf just below her. It rocked under her weight, but it did not fall. From there she clambered down. Above her, Jem reached the window, and then Carrie. Each of them began to climb down the same way Lauren had. Lauren ignored them. She walked slowly across the floor to the figure in the chair. Blood soaked his clothing, running down the chair to pool on the floor, but his throat was not cut. He still lived, and at the sound of her approaching footsteps, he turned his face up to her. Chet. Next chapter is going to be rough, but we're going to do our best. Chapter 31. Chet gasped at the sight of her. Lauren fell on her knees beside his chair, slashing at his bonds with her dagger. His arms came free, but he could not support his own weight. He slumped forwards, falling hard out of the chair to hit the stone floor. He had been cut, tortured. Lauren had seen a great deal of cruelty since leaving the birchwood, but this was among the worst of it. In her mind's eye, she saw Damaris here, a sharp knife in her hand. No dream sight, but only a product of her own imagination, her knowledge. Damaris with Chet kneeling behind him. Damaris plying his skin, slicing the flesh beneath. Damaris avoiding the veins so that he did not bleed to death too soon. Damaris taking her time, making it last. Damaris smiling all the while. Chet, said Lauren. She rolled him over. Chet. Chet. She threw off her cloak, balling it up and putting it beneath his head. Suddenly she realized she was touching him, her hands on his shoulder, his neck, his head. But he was almost senseless, and he could hardly withdraw from her even if he wanted to. No, gasped Jem. Lauren looked up. The boy stood a pace away, looking down at Chet, his face a mask of horror. But Carrie pushed past him, kneeling at Chet's side across from Lauren. Without hesitation, she tore Chet's shirt open to inspect his wounds. Where before the girl had been shaking with fear at their plight, now her hands were steady as she probed the cuts. Chet groaned at each touch of her fingers, but she only inspected him for a short moment before she looked up at Lauren. She shook her head. Lauren's mouth worked, looking for words. She found none and looked back down at him. Lauren, he gasped. His eyes opened and they were clear. Lauren withdrew her hands from him at once. I'm here, she said. I'm here, Chet. I came. How did you... He coughed. Blood bubbled from between his lips. His face was bruised. She thought his nose must be broken. His red matted hair stuck out in all directions. How did you know where I was? I did not, said Lauren. We were running. I knew I had to come here. It seemed as if he tried to nod, but the movement only made him grimace in pain. The dreams. Yes, she whispered. Chet began to weep. Hot tears slid down his cheeks, mingling with the blood, and silent sobs made his chest jerk. It hurts, yet at the same time it is like I cannot feel it. Once she started, she would not stop, no matter what I said. Lauren did not have to ask who he meant. Damaris. How did she find you? I did not make it beyond sight of the city, said Chet. They caught me. Gregor, some others. The moment they appeared, I froze, limp, like a fawn when a wolf seizes its throat, and it was like I knew that it would happen, that it was inevitable. The elves, they told you. I thought about it all the way back to the city, trussed up on Gregor's saddle. Carrie looked at Lauren in shock. Lauren ignored her. The elf's words rang in her mind. The one who walks with death. A wave of pain struck him, and he cried out. His hands gripped his shirt. Lauren squeezed her fingers together until she thought they would break, keeping herself from taking his hand, holding him, touching his face. Not now. She would leave him alone for now, at least, until after. She forced herself to be calm, forced away the despair that clawed at her mind, her soul. She must be strong. For him, not for herself. It hurts, he whispered again. Lauren's hand went to the hilt of her dagger, not one of her throwing daggers, the dagger on the back of her belt, finely made, with black designs made of magestones. Finely crafted with black designs made of magestone, the dagger Chet had used to kill Auntie. I could help, she whispered. I can end it. The pain would stop. And deep within her heart she knew she would. If he asked her to, she would. It would be the first life she had ever taken on purpose, but she would do it, to keep him from more pain. No, he gasped. I can feel that it is almost over. If I only have a few moments left, I would rather spend them with you. Fresh tears sprang from his eyes, but they were different. His face contorted in grief, not pain. "Do not worry," said Lauren. "I will not leave. No, He gasped against a fresh wave of pain before he could go on. "I told her. Damaris. I told her. I told her everything. Your dreams. The elves. Your dagger. What it means to the mystics." Lauren quailed. She had thought that nothing could overwhelm her grief, but now terror came flooding in to replace it. It was the secret she had held ever since Wellmont, when Jordell had first told her all the secrets of the dagger, that knowledge in the hands of Damaris. But she forced such thoughts away. There would be time to deal with that. There would be no more time to spend with Chet. "It is all right," she said, determined not to let him see her fear. "You could have done nothing more." "I did not tell her where Cal was," he whispered. "It was the only thing I could hold on to, and I had told her so much already. When I lied at last, she believed me." "That was brave," she said. "That was brave, Chet. You saved many lives." She forced away thoughts of Jormund, of all the mystics who had died in the palace just moments ago. Chet knew nothing of them. He did not need to. "I'm glad they will live," he whispered. "Glad I could do that much at least." "You have done so much more," said Lauren. A ragged gasp racked his body. Suddenly his hand shot out to clutch hers. Lauren looked down at her hand in shock. His fingers laced through hers. His blood still ran from wounds on his fingers, and it mixed with the blood of her sliced palm. She held him back, squeezing, giving him an anchor. It hurts," he gasped. You deserve better, but please." "What, Chet?" she said. "I have water. No," he whispered. "Please." "Hold me?" She lifted him up at once, lifted him to sitting, ignoring the grunt of pain. Carrie opened her mouth as if to speak, but she held herself back. Doubtless this would worsen the wound, but what did it matter? It would be over soon anyway. It would all be over. Chet's arm snaked around her back, but slowly, and she stroked his hair. He buried his face in her shoulder, and she squeezed, letting him feel her arms around him. He turned his head, and she pulled back, thinking she was smothering him. But he kissed her, softly, briefly. She returned it. No passion, no lust, no time for that now. But she poured all of her love into it, in that brief moment of the meeting of their lips, and then they held each other again. Chet shuddered, and then she felt it, like a felled animal in the woods where Chet had taught her to hunt in the first place. She felt the life slip from him. He was gone. Gone to where she could not follow him anymore. Okay, done chapter. I need to take a break. Back in a few. Woof! All right, we're back. Boy, that scene is always rough to read. It has been rough every single time. Every single time. Chapter 32. The treasury fell to silence. The only sounds were the muted voices of guards in the courtyard and on the walls outside, still no doubt searching for Lauren and her friends, and the quiet, racking sobs of Jem. But after a short while had passed, Carrie reached over and put her hand on Lauren's shoulder. "I'm sorry," she said, "but we are still in danger." "I know," said Lauren, "I know." Gently she laid Chet down, then took her cloak and stood to don it. She refused to look at him. They had to leave him here. Lauren hated it, but she knew she must. She went to Jem's side and put an arm around his shoulders. He turned to her and threw his arms around her, weeping, his tears soaking into her fine new shirt. "The front door will be guarded," said Carrie quietly, "but we might fight our way out. It is the only thing I can think of." "There's no need," said Lauren. She gingerly unwrapped Jem's arm from around her waist, and then she went to the corner of the room. A tapestry hung there. Lauren remembered it. The man in black had shown it to her. She pushed it aside, and there was only a blank stone wall. Kneeling, Lauren felt for the chink in the stone. After a moment she found it, and her fingers pulled on the lever. 2 stones swung open, revealing the passageway. Carrie gawked at her. "I am the Nightblade," said Lauren. Then she remembered what the man in black had said in her dreams. "It is my job to know the secret ways no one else knows." She led the way, crawling into the passage. Jem came behind her, still sniffling, and Carrie brought up the rear. Soon the passageway was completely black. Lauren reached into her cloak and pulled out a maidstone, breaking off a piece and eating it. Then she reached to the back of her belt and drew her dagger, holding it in one hand as she proceeded. With the maidstone in her blood and her hand on the dagger, the passageway was suddenly bright as day. "I cannot see," said Carrie. "You do not need to," said Lauren. "There is only one way out. Only one way out." She crawled forwards, following the passageway as it turned left and right, warning her friends each time. Soon it sloped up, and she knew they were near the end. At last it came. She reached up, finding the chink in the stone and pulling the lever. The wall swung out soundlessly. Lauren crawled into the open. They were in the palace. The hallway was wide and tall, and there were many doors in it. To their left, Lauren thought she saw the hallway reach the main front hall, while to the right it ended in a door. But in the middle there was a side hallway leading deeper into the palace. "I know where we are. The front doors are that way." Carrie pointed to the left. "If the mystics still hold the front gate." "They do not," said Lauren. "They will have left, or they are already dead. This way." She started off for the side hallway. "How do you know?" said Carrie, but she followed along, Jem by her side. "It is enough that I do." How could she begin to explain? Lauren led them on the course that she had been shown. They walked down hallways that felt familiar to Lauren by now, though she had never seen them in the waking world. The dream sight still had its hold on her, but it was not like before. Now, seeing the places from her dreams did not disorient her or send her mind spinning. Now it was like she was following a route marked on a map. She turned the final corner, and there it was, as she had known it would be. Ahead, an open door leading to a dining hall, and beyond that, freedom. To the left, a small wooden door led to a serving room. Lauren came to a halt. "There," said Carrie. "That gate is open. We can escape." "Take Jem with you," said Lauren. "I must go another way." They both stopped short. Carrie looked over her shoulder towards the hallway that ran to the front of the palace. Voices drifted from that direction, far away but coming closer. "What do you mean?" she said. "What other way?" "Lauren," Jem began. "Shush," said Lauren. "You and Carrie must go into the dining hall. Wait at the other end for a short while, then run for the city. You will be able to escape, I swear it." Jem set his jaw. "I will not leave. Not without you. Not after Chet. That way is for others, but not for you." "You are not leaving me," said Lauren, "but there is one thing I must do first before I follow you." He paused. "What thing?" Lauren gave him a sad smile and gently pushed his shoulder. "Never you worry, Master Urchin, but I swear this now. I will find you back at Cal's hideout. I would not leave you and Annis to fend for yourselves." Jem looked up into her eyes, studying them. "Poor Jem," thought Lauren. "You cannot recognize a lie in my eyes. In Damaris and Auntie I met 2 of the most cunning minds in the 9 kingdoms, and they could not tell if I spoke the truth. What hope do you have?" "Very well," said Jem slowly. "I believe you." "Of course you do," she said. "Now go. Look after Carrie." His chest puffed up a bit at that. Over his head, Lauren caught Carrie's eye and winked. The girl gave a smile, little more than a small twist of the lips. Carrie had one advantage over Jem. She had not known Lauren long enough to think she knew when Lauren was telling the truth. Jem led the way into the dining hall, but Carrie paused for just a moment. "You had better not have lied to that boy," she said quietly. "I will expect you back at the hideout." Lauren nodded solemnly. Then she turned and ducked into the serving room, pausing for just a moment to ensure that Carrie went to follow Jem. Inside, she found the room laid out just as she had known it would be. Against the back wall was the shelf of dishes. Lauren threw it away from the wall, not caring about the clatter it made. She was past that now. The passageway beyond led her to the ladder, and that led to the passageway above. That ended in the tapestry, and Lauren pulled it aside. She stepped into Gregor's room. He stood at the other end, framed by the open doorway. In his hands was a massive longbow longbow, a view longer than Lauren was tall. He faced away from her, scanning the courtyard below. The room was modest by Damaris's standards, but still held finery beyond anything Lauren had ever seen growing up. The tapestry through which she had emerged was matched by one on the other side of the room, and all the furniture was carved of solid oak, inlaid with finely wrought gold. There were many lanterns around the room, but only 3 were lit, leaving the whole place dim. They were the only illumination, for outside the night was still misty and clouded. The moons and stars cast no glow upon the room, nor even upon Gregor himself. Lauren turned and closed the door to the passageway, making no effort to mask the sound. Gregor's head snapped up, and he turned to her. For a long moment he stood there, studying her. Then, inexorable as a rock slide, he stepped into the room. One hand drifted behind him, closing the glass balcony door. He pulled a sash, holding back a curtain, and it fell across the door, sealing the room against the last rays of torchlight from beyond. This is the only way, thought Lauren. All roads lead to Gregor. "Hello, Nightblade," said Gregor. His voice rolled through the room like thunder. "Damaris promised me this, that together we would make you suffer, and then at last I would get to kill you." Chapter 32, Dern! Chapter 33, I thought I might find you here, said Lauren lightly. Gregor snorted. Did you? But he paused, and his eyes hardened to steel. Ah, the boy told us things. Your dreams. Did they lead you here to die? Hardly a useful tool. Lauren shrugged, letting her gaze drift around the room. Across the room was the only other door. It led to the rest of the palace, to escape. She turned away from it. They have proven more useful than you might realize. After all, they have told me where to find your mistress. The bodyguard froze. Lauren widened her eyes. Oh, did you not imagine I would know that? That I had not planned all this? While you waste your time here with me, mystics are even now descending on Damaris's location, and Gregor charged. Lauren had expected it, but the giant's speed never failed to surprise her. She leaped away from the tapestry, making for the room's door. But Gregor anticipated the move, and his hand swiped out. Lauren dropped and rolled, but her foot overextended, kicking a side table. One of the lamps fell to the floor, shattering its glass. The light went out, and the room grew dimmer still. Quickly, Lauren scrambled for her feet, but Gregor was almost upon her, and she had to roll away from the door. He paused there, shoulders hunched, arms to his side. Lauren thanked the sky that he did not have his sword on him. You did not plan this night, he growled. If you had, you would never have left Chet for us to kill. You have no right to speak his name, hissed Lauren. But she thought, even now, Jem and Carrie will be making their way across the courtyard. Almost there, almost free. She circled, keeping her eyes fixed on Gregor. It almost made her forget his longbow, which he had dropped. Her foot hit it, and she nearly tripped. Gregor tensed, but when she righted herself, he subsided. In one fluid motion, Lauren crouched and picked up the bow. It felt like a spear in her hands, if only she were Uzo. Do you think that will save you, girl? Said Gregor. That little stick? Cruel words, said Lauren. After all, it is your little stick. That's one of my favorite things. Hey, what's up, Clundy man? Sorry I didn't see you arrive. Gregor growled and charged again. Lauren leaped to the side, swinging the longbow at him. He raised an arm to block it, and it cracked over his forearm. Grunting in pain, he swung his other fist at her. Lauren could not quite dodge it. It smashed into her shoulder, flinging her across the room. She rolled with the landing, fighting to her feet at once. In one hand, she still held half of the longbow. The broken end was jagged and splintered. She thrust it at Gregor, forcing him back. I think I am at a disadvantage, she said. If only I had learned to fight. I tried to get you to teach me once. Do you remember? I begged you for swordplay lessons, but then as now, you could not quite catch me. Will you not give me a sword again? It is the only way this fight will be fair. Who wants a fair fight, said Gregor. I have only one goal here tonight, to end your life and to take as long as I can in doing so. It's going good. About to finish. They had spun around each other again, and now the balcony door was behind Lauren. She reversed her grip on the longbow, throwing it at him like a spear. He batted it aside, but she had not truly meant to hit him. Lauren turned, dashing for the balcony. She threw aside the curtain, her hand coming down on the latch. It did not turn. Locked. A fist bigger than her head closed on the hood of her cloak. This is it. Gregor flung her away from the door. She flew all the way across the room, crushing another lamp. Lauren felt a sharp pain, broken glass or a cracking rib, and gasped. Then she smiled. Rolling over, she saw Gregor stalking towards her. He wanted to get his hands on her, pin her down, but he was moving slowly. He did not want to give her another chance to escape. Lauren's hand fell to her belt, closing around a knife. She drew it and threw. Gregor halted, raising one mailed arm to stop the blade, but it flew straight past him, to strike the third and final lamp, sending it crashing to the floor. The room went utterly black. Oh, thank you, Find the Time. Appreciate that. Lauren drew the dagger from the back of her belt. In her vision, the room grew bright as daylight, but Gregor was blind, and he would not know she could see. Chet would not have told him, for Lauren had never told Chet. She had not wanted him to know about the Maidstones. Gregor took a cautious step back. His leg struck a footstool, and he stumbled, barely keeping his feet. Experimenting, Lauren scuffed a foot on the floor. Gregor's head jerked towards the sound, but too far so that he was looking to her left. Lauren's smile widened. "You misunderstand the dreams," said Lauren. He jerked again, following her voice. She let him hear where she was. "They tell me some things, but not everything. They did not tell me I would find Damaris alone in Yawamba, that you had abandoned her. And no, they did not tell me you would take Chet tonight. But if you think they did not tell me about you here, now, you are wrong." Gregor made his cautious way forwards, reaching for where he could hear her voice. "I came here, Gregor, because I wanted to." Softening her footfalls, she began to stalk around him. On the soft rugs of the room, she made less noise than the wind. Gregor swiped his arms through where she had been standing a moment before. "This is pointless," he growled. "Do you think the darkness is your friend? It will not help when I get my hands on you." From behind, Lauren leaped. She plunged the dagger into his calf. The blade parted cloth and flesh with equal ease. Lauren shuddered. It felt so good, so right. Had she really never used the dagger on another living person before? She knew now that had always been the dagger's purpose. It was never meant for anything else. She leaped back even as Gregor groaned and stumbled to one knee. He reached behind himself, but she was already gone. Lauren darted in again. Her blade impaled his groping forearm. Gregor gave a brief shout, quickly cut off. He tried to rise, but he had to favor his injured leg. It was useless, unable to support his weight. He swung a wild, angry blow that Lauren ducked with ease. She struck again, plunging the dagger into the pit of his good arm. It fell useless to his side. He placed her at last, and his fingers closed on the front of her shirt, but she had already stabbed that arm through. Now she sliced it again. She did not know where to cut exactly, but the dagger seemed to. It parted muscle and tendon, and his grip slackened. His balance wavered, and he crashed to the floor on his back. Desperately, he tried to push away from her with his one good leg. Lauren took one of the throwing daggers from her belt and flung it into his ankle. It flew hard enough to pin the limb to the floor beneath. "And here I thought," Gregor's words cut off in a groan of pain, "here I thought you had no spine." The words were defiant, his tone more so, but Lauren could see it plain as day on his face, clear as if a lantern were right in his eyes. Fear. Gregor feared her. His chest heaved with every breath, and sweat ran from him in rivulets. She wondered how long it had been since the giant had been beaten in a fight, beaten so soundly that even his limbs were useless, if it had ever happened at all. "You thought me weak for refusing to kill," said Lauren. "You still do not recognize the truth. Murder is the coward's way out." He grunted a laugh. "What do you call this, then?" A fierce smile crossed Lauren's lips. "I suppose I do not feel particularly brave at the moment." That forced a laugh from him. "Then I go to my death with one consolation. This pain is nothing compared to the boys, to Chet's." He gave an evil grin into what was, to him, empty darkness. "I made sure he suffered. I relished every twist of pain on his face as I cut him up, one piece at a time. If I must go to the darkness below, I do so happy, knowing that nothing will ever bring back the boy you loved, the boy I took from you." Lauren crossed to kneel by his head. She leaned in close. "I know you are lying." He started at the sound of her voice so close. Only one arm could still move, and he swung it at her, even though it could not grip. She caught his hand on the blade of her knife. Gregor cried out, a scream of pain that she was ashamed of herself for enjoying. "I know you are lying," she said again, easily, as though nothing had happened. "I saw Chet. He died slowly, yes, but not by your hand. When Annis and I first met, she told me. She told me how Damaris would torture information from her prisoners, taking her time with the pain, enjoying every cut. It was Damaris who killed him, and I promise you this, I will hunt her down. I will never stop until I find her, and when I do, I will not bring her before the King's justice. I am the King's justice. I will find Damaris and end her, just as I have ended you here tonight." It dawned on Gregor. Recognition. Lauren watched it spread across his face like a tide creeping up ashore. He knew she spoke the truth, that she meant what she said. It was only a matter of time before Damaris was dead. And just as that realization came upon him, Lauren drew the dagger across his throat. He sagged back to the floor, his lifeblood bubbling up. He coughed, choking, trying desperately to breathe. Blood spurted across his face and ran down the sides of his neck to pool, soaking into the carpet below, staining it. Like Duras, like Chet. America! Fuck yeah! I hope that's a fuck yeah moment when readers get to that part in the book. Lauren sank back on her knees. Chapter 34, Lauren sank back on her heels, staring. The Maidstones and her dagger let her see Every detail of Gregor's corpse, it sat there, silent, still, confronting her. A sick, twisting feeling ripped through her gut. She ignored it. Cal had given her a mission, and she was still in the palace. First she went to the balcony and opened the door. The courtyard beyond was still empty, but guards stood on the wall beyond it. They did not notice her, but they soon would. Lauren ducked back into the room and went to Gregor. She lifted his arm and pulled, but she could not move him. Clenching her jaw, she heaved. His body barely moved. She went to the rug upon which he lay and seized the edge of it. Again she pulled. This time it worked. The rug slid on the wooden floor. It still seemed to her that he should be too heavy, but something, the thrill of the fight, some gift of the dagger, let her move him. On the balcony she lifted his head up until it hung over the railing. Then, straining and groaning, she managed to fling him over the balcony to land in the courtyard far below. The courtyard struck the smooth white stones with a sick thud. That drew the attention of the guards on the wall. They cried out, and soon other guards came running from all directions. Soon there was a small crowd of them in the courtyard below, staring at Gregor's corpse. As one, they joined the guards on the wall in looking up at her. Lauren threw her shoulders back. Her black cloak and her new clothes were all stained in blood. She hoped they could see it. "Gregor is dead," she proclaimed. "Damaris of the family Yerrin is soon to follow, and the usurper, Wojin, will never escape the king's justice. Abandon him, or you too will face me before the end." Then she vanished back inside the apartment. She left by the front entrance, not the secret one. Soon there was a staircase leading down, and she emerged into another hallway full of rooms. One of them had an open door, and she stole through it to the balcony beyond. This led her to the rooftop she had traveled with Jem and Carrie not long ago. She stalked around the palace's perimeter, stopping to look and listen at every window. Then at last she found the one she was looking for. A balcony just above her head led to a wide glass door. Pulling herself up, Lauren saw Wojin. The false king was in urgent conference with an advisor, and Lauren saw 2 guards inside the room as well. A single lamp lit the room, but none of them were looking at her, and in any case the lamp inside the room would keep them from seeing outside. She clambered up onto the balcony, sidling up to the doorway to listen. Wojin raised his head to speak to the guards. "What of the attackers?" "At least one still remains, your grace. You must stay here until we have confirmed the palace is secure." Wojin gave an exasperated sigh. "This gambit was foolish. I told that Yerrin woman often enough, and she is not even here to face the same danger as the rest of us." Damaris, thought Lauren. She has left, then. Mayhap it is time for me to go as well. Her gaze came to rest on Wojin. Or mayhap not. Lauren burst through the door into the room. Wojin shot to his feet, and the guards went to draw their swords, but Lauren struck before they could, kicking over the lamp. It was not complete darkness, for the window let some torchlight in, but it was enough for her purposes. One guard fell to a punishing blow from her dagger's hilt. The other only managed 2 swings before Lauren brought him down. The advisor screamed and ran for the door, but Lauren tackled him, then slammed his head into the floor to knock him senseless. But no killing, she thought. There's been enough of that tonight. Lauren rose to her feet. "Achilles! Long time no see. How's it going?" "Wojin," she said, "what a pleasure to meet you face to face." "Assassin," gasped Wojin. "No," said Lauren, shaking her head, "but I have killed Gregor tonight, and you are utterly at my mercy. Yet I was told a long time ago that not needlessly does the family Yerrin kill, and the Nightblade has at least that much honor." Wojin swallowed hard. She watched the bulb in his throat bounce up and down. What do you mean to do with me, then?" "Silence you, for one thing." She cut a gag out of the drapes and tied it around his mouth. Then she bound his hands before leading him out to the balcony. Once he was up against the railing, she shoved him in the shoulder blades. Wojin screamed into his gag as he fell, but she caught him by the ankles. Lauren lowered him as far as she could, then dropped him to the rooftop below so that he fell on his shoulder. He grunted in pain. Lauren jumped down beside him, then forced him up and back towards the palace. She bundled him in through a lower window, then pulled down his gag once he was inside. "We are going to your dungeons," she said. "If you try to signal for help, I will make you regret it." Wojin nodded in fear, but she saw a crafty shine in his eye. The dungeons would be guarded, and they would not be easy to escape from. That was the point, after all. No doubt he hoped he could trick her into trapping herself there. Good, it would keep him thinking out a way out of this. The maps of the palace were still somewhat clear in her mind. She knew she was on the southwest end of the palace, and the dungeons were close by. She only needed to find a way leading down. There. She shoved Wojin into a stairwell, barely catching him before he fell to the landing below. When they were near the bottom, she stopped and knelt, tying Wojin's feet as she had tied his hands. "Do not move," she said. "I will return for you in a moment." She ducked around the final turn in the stairs. Behind her, she heard Wojin start to struggle immediately. That was fine. He would not free himself before she was done. There was a guard room before the door that led to the dungeons themselves. In the room sat man in palace livery. He shot to his feet when Lauren entered, giving a cry of alarm. Lauren threw a dagger into the hand that reached for his sword, then subdued him with 2 quick strikes to the face. He slumped to the floor, groaning. His belt held a ring of keys. She removed them and went back for Wojin. His bonds were not even loosened yet. He moaned in fear as she hauled him up and shoved him into the guard room. She unlocked the first door and walked him down the line of cells, peering inside. There, a cell of healthy prisoners, clearly not here for very long. Their hair was cut short and they were well-muscled and healthy. "You there," said Lauren. "Are you palace guards?" One of the prisoners peered up at her, blinking. "Palace guards. Did you serve in the palace?" "I did," said the man. "Who are you?" Then he noticed Wojin, bound and with Lauren's arm around his neck. His eyes shot wide. "Yes, it is him," said Lauren. "I'm looking for someone. Marana of the family Fae. Where is she?" "I am Marana," said a voice. Lauren turned. The cell across the hall held still more prisoners. One of them, a woman with her hair cut almost to her scalp, stood before the bars. She studied Lauren with keen, severe eyes Lauren had seen before in the face of Doris Faye. Lauren reached up and ripped out Wojin's gag. "Tell them what you did." "I do not know what you speak of," said Wojin desperately. Lauren's dagger slid free, and she pressed the tip to his throat. "Not needlessly will I kill, but neither will I be gentle. Tell them what you did to King June." Wojin gasped, trying to struggle away from the dagger. "I killed him," he whispered. "Louder." "I killed him," cried Wojin. "I took the palace by force, but he and his son escaped. But I found them after, and my soldiers killed June." Lauren pressed harder. The dagger pricked the skin of his throat, and Wojin squeaked. "And tell her what happened to Duris." Damaris learned that she was conspiring with King June," said Wojin, nearly weeping now. We killed her." Lauren pressed just a bit harder. "Tell them everything. Tell her how Duris died." "Damaris put her to the question," cried Wojin. "She's tortured her for information before cutting her throat." Marana had gone very still, her fingers wrapped around the iron bars of her cell. She met Lauren's gaze. "Do you know who else in this dungeon is loyal to June?" said Lauren. "I do," said Marana. Her tone clipped. Lauren removed her dagger and threw Wojin to the floor, where he crumpled in a heap. She opened Marana's cell and handed her the ring of keys. "Get them all out. Take care of this thing." She spat on Wojin's form on the floor. "I will send help as soon as I can. Senlin still lives. He will return to give you orders. Can you hold out until then?" "We can," said Marana. But as Lauren turned to go, she reached out and seized her wrist. "You did all this?" Lauren met her gaze for a moment. "Not on my own," she said softly. "Many people died to return the true king to the throne. See that their sacrifice was not in vain." Marana nodded slowly. Lauren turned and ran up the stairs back into the palace. Chapter 34, Dune! Chapter 35. Her kidnap of Wojin had thrown the guards into disarray. It was easy enough to find another rooftop to sneak away on, and when she found a side wall leading out, no guards were there to block her path. She climbed down the wall and made her way into the streets of the city. Without Carrie to guide her, it took a great deal longer to find Cal's Inn than it might have otherwise, but in the end she found it all the same. When she approached the side door leading to the basement, the mystic on guard moved to stop her at first, but when he caught sight of Lauren's face, he gasped and stepped back. Lauren ignored him, throwing open the door and descending into the room. Chapter 34, PogChamp! "Lauren!" Jem screamed as he flung himself into her arms. Annis was only a half step behind him, and then came Carrie. They huddled around her, holding her close, the children crying. None of them paid the least bit of attention to the blood soaking Lauren's clothes, but in the end Lauren pulled back. It would be a while, she guessed, before she felt that these clothes were truly clean again, and she did not wish to sully her friends with them. Someone had summoned Cal, and he came huffing into the room. He stopped dead when he saw Lauren, staring at her for a moment in shock. Lauren fixed him with a grim smile. "Hello, Grand Chancellor. You seem surprised to see me." He swallowed and forced the awe from his expression. "The boy and the girl returned, but from what they said, I did not know if you would. Yet here I am." "Were they right?" said Cal. "Jormund?" "Dead with all his soldiers," said Lauren. "But I captured Wojin. He is in the hands of June's loyalists in the prison. You must get all the warriors under your command and help them take the palace as quickly as you can." No doubt it grated Cal to hear her give such orders, but he had the good sense to hide it for the moment. She could see the amazement in his expression. He had likely never expected her to succeed. Lauren did not think he had sent her to her death, not intentionally, but she had only been a tool to get his assassins within reach of their target. No doubt he was surprised at her success when all his mystics had perished. "Yes, well," he said. "Good. Worse than I had hoped, but better than I feared. I shall act at once. Excuse me." Of course, I shall be waiting to give you a more complete report when you are ready. Lauren allowed herself the small pleasure of waving him away. He scowled at that, but he went, going back to his room to give the orders. Lauren had lied, of course. She would not be waiting for him. She ushered Jem and Annis towards one of the rooms they shared. Inside they found Weil. He sprang to his feet the moment the door opened, his face going ashen when he saw Lauren. Nightblade, he said, you survived. I did, said Lauren, though others did not. Close the door, Jem. Hey, what's up, Hope of December? Oh my god, we're so close. The boy hurried to do as she asked, and Lauren went to sit on the bed. She was likely getting blood on the blanket, but she did not care. Annis and Jem stood before her, their eyes wide, but Carrie looked at Lauren's face, studying her. Lauren thought she saw something in the girl's eyes. Recognition? Understanding? I killed Gregor, whispered Lauren. I killed him. The room went still. Carrie's expression grew dour, and Weil only blinked. But Annis and Jem looked at each other in fear. Only they could know what this moment truly meant. And I am leaving, continued Lauren. I must go off on my own again, because I need to kill Damaris. Annis sagged. She sank down on the bed, sitting on its edge. Her hands were shaking. Jem took them quickly, holding them between his own. Lauren, said Annis. She killed Chet, Annis, said Lauren, and not quickly. No, I know, said Annis. I understand, and I will come with you. Lauren shook her head slowly. You should not. This is not like our journeys before. I am no longer running. I am looking to right a wrong. But none of our journeys have been like another, said Annis. Yet we have always been together. I know what you must do. Jem and Carrie told me about Chet. I want to go with you. Top Choice College? Well done! Well, good luck on your FAFSA. I don't know what a FAFSA is. That's fucking great. Lauren found it hard to speak, past a sudden tightness in her throat, and her voice broke. Then I welcome your company. It would be an emptier road if I did not ride it with you. I suppose it need not be said that I am coming as well, said Jem. Somehow Lauren found the strength to smile. Of course not. I was going to ask you to do so. He smirked, but it died quickly. Lauren looked past him to Weil. At once the smuggler spread his hands, shaking his head. No, I have enjoyed your company, Nightblade, but I have ridden quite a bit farther than I had ever planned to. I believe I will remain here, reaping the gratitude of the new king. You can collect that gratitude easily enough by letter, said Lauren. I am certain Senlin will accommodate you. But we need to travel by secret ways that no one else knows, and we would pay you handsomely. Why not also earn yourself the gratitude of Underrealm's greatest thief? Her stomach turned. She had almost said assassin. Oh, gotcha. Weil eyed the door to their room and pursed his lips. I suppose it is true that I would rather not be in Danfon just now, he muttered. I trust Senlin, but that Cal fellow... He sighed and held up a finger. Very well, but you will pay me full rates. I never give a discount, even to friends. It only cheapens the friendship. Fair enough, said Lauren, and thank you. Twiggly Bits! Oh, that username. Weil stood and bowed to her. You are welcome, Nightblade. I am at your disposal, for a while at least. Then let us not delay, said Lauren, pushing herself up off the bed. The road is long, and we should begin. Now, said Jem, eyes widening in surprise. There is no better time, said Lauren. Damaris already has a head start. I think you are right, said Annis. Lauren nodded, then turned to Carrie. Farewell, Caradwin. I am glad to have known you, even for a little while. Look after Senlin for us. He will need friends in the days to come. Carrie's eyes flashed. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, and she tilted up her chin. No. That gave Lauren pause. She frowned at Carrie. No? No. I will not stay here to look after a boy. I mean, he may be king, but she took a deep breath and released it in a rush. I want to come with you. Lauren's frown deepened, furrowing her brow. With us? Why? You know why. I want to do more. More than I can do here, even if I were to help Senlin. Slowly, Lauren shook her head. No, Carrie, you are a healer, a chemist. On the road we travel, I must be a killer. Carrie cocked her head. I have never believed that killing was always wrong. Ah, that Twiggly Bits. Lauren opened her mouth to argue again, and then she closed it. Very well, she said, shrugging. You may come if you wish, but it must be now. Carrie did not answer, but only fell in behind the children as they followed Lauren out the door. Lauren led them down the hallway towards the back entrance to the inn, but as they passed one of the last doors, Jem came to a stop. A moment, he said, and opened the door. Jem, said Lauren, but then she froze. It was Prince Senlin's room. Joe had leaped to his feet as the door opened, but when he saw Jem, the bodyguard dropped his hand from his sword. Prince Senlin stood to greet Jem, dumbfounded. Master Noctis, he said, can I help you? I only wanted to say, said Jem. A flush crept up his cheeks, and he took another step into the room. I cannot explain everything now, but I think, after tonight, I think you will be a very good king. A small smile crossed Senlin's lips. Thank you. That is reassuring too. His words died as Jem leaped forwards and kissed him. Senlin's eyes widened, and next to them both, Joe froze in shock. Then Senlin closed his eyes and gripped Jem's shoulders. For a moment, all of time seemed frozen, and Lauren thought even her heart must have stopped beating. Then at last, Jem drew away. Senlin took a small, sharp breath. That is all I wanted to say, said Jem. Then he fled from the room as fast as his feet would carry him. He seized Lauren's arm and drew her along after him. Sky above, hurry before he has a chance to say something. Lauren only caught one brief glance of Senlin, standing there with his fingers on his lips before she passed from view of him. They reached the back door. By some stroke of fortune, Uzo was on guard duty again, but then Lauren did not much believe in fortune any longer. No doubt this was some design of fate as well, the same fate that had brought her visions, curse and blessing that they were, but time enough for those thoughts later. Uzo glanced down at Lauren in surprise as she approached, and then he eyed her companions. A grim look came into his eyes. Lauren thought for a moment that he would try to stop them. Instead, he merely reached over and opened the door for her. Thank you, said Lauren quietly. Farewell. Say goodbye to Shiyun for us. She should understand. She will, said Uzo. Farewell, Nightblade. It has been the greatest honor of my life, so far anyway. Whatever you must do, make them pay. I will, said Lauren, and she took her first step into the darkness, a darkness that she had fully embraced for the first time. Dun dun dun! Book! Author's note. Raise your hand if you know what fridging is. That's a trick question. You might not know the term, but you definitely know the trope if you've ever consumed books, movies, or comics. This is the first book I've written since the end of what I've taken to calling the Restoration Project. When I first started the Books of Underrealm, I had no editor. None of all. That, of course, was a huge mistake. My books were published with typos and plot holes aplenty. I knew it, but I simply couldn't afford to pay an editor. That all changed in 2015. But unfortunately, at that time, I ended up working with an editor who, well, let's just say I wish they'd never touched my books. Not only did they miss some of my typos and errors, but they ended up making thousands of silent edits to my work. Edits I never got to see, never got to approve or disapprove. And not only did that massively change my voice, but they actually introduced errors into the work. Real factual typos and grammar mistakes, as well as errors in the world I'd built. As just one example, the editor changed one description of ice in the south to ice in the north, because apparently they couldn't imagine a fantasy world that wasn't Eurocentric. So, from October of 2016 to May of 2017, I engaged in a huge project to re-edit and re-release all of my books. I eventually took to calling it the Restoration Project, restoring the books to my own voice, but also getting them actually professionally edited by an actual professional editor. I was so very happy when that project finally ended just 2 months ago as I'm writing this, but then all of a sudden I found myself in an odd position, writing an entirely new book. This is the first book that was conceived, outlined, written, and edited, all with my current workflow, and it's the workflow I plan to use from here on out. My editor, Karen Conlon, is fantastic, and I'd be a fool to release a book she hasn't worked on. My proofreaders are excellent, my beta readers are simply some of the best people. The book you've just received is 100% bona fide, pure Underrealm, grade A, just how I wanted it to be, and without any undesirables sticking their fingers into the mix. That means if you find a typo, I'm going to eat Major Crow, but at least it's a mistake I can own. Oh, really, Garrett? So it was entirely your decision to kill Chet? Not sure you should be bragging about this. Yeah. Okay, there's a bit to unpack here. Chet was, well, he was meant to be a few things. You know by now that Underrealm is trying to be a bit different from a lot of fantasy universes out there. It draws from medieval times, yes, but it doesn't feel obligated to obey the usual perception of medieval culture when it comes to societal norms. And why should it? It's not more unrealistic to allow gay people to, exist than it is to have fire mages, or were-mages, or a necromancer. But with the exploration of gender, sexuality, and race in fantasy, there's some other things I kind of needed to do. You see, there's gender in story, and then there's gender in storytelling. The two are related, but also separate. You can have different rules for different genders in your story, but subconsciously, most storytellers apply different rules for different genders in their storytelling. One of the most egregious ways this has manifested itself is in the concept of fridging. Like the word fridge, but a verb. In summary, it's when female characters are harmed or killed in order to further the storyline and character development of a male character. This isn't just because they're women and women are treated worse in the story universe. A male companion of the male character would serve just as well, but because so many writers consider women characters to be little more than a prop that helps the male protagonist. If you're wondering, the word fridging comes from the surprisingly frequent number of times these women are killed and then literally stuffed into a fridge for the male character to find. Pleasant, right? So, from the beginning, the Nightblade Epic was meant to be an exploration of gender dynamics in fantasy and adventure stories and what those dynamics would look like if they were flipped on their head. That's why Chet suffered what he did in the previous book, Weremage. That's why he went through what he did in this book, and it's why his story ended the way it did. Not only because I wanted to flip the trope on its head and see how straight white guys liked it when their sole representation in the story was used in this way, though I personally think that would have been a good enough reason all on its own to do so, but I hope I managed Chet's storyline in a way that's more respectful than fridged women usually get. Because it isn't just fridging itself that's so annoying or even its prevalence in storytelling. It's the way the women in these scenarios just suck. As characters, I mean. They really aren't people to the storytellers. They're plot devices for the purpose of enhancing the person the writer really cares about, their protagonist, who's almost always a straight white dude. But I cared about Chet. I care about Chet. No, he wasn't perfect, but he was mine, and I loved him. I tried my damnedest to make him a real person, and to show what a real person would act like if they went through what he went through. Transfixed? Oh, is transfixed. And holy shit, dear reader, when I wrote that scene, I cried. I stopped writing and I cried for, well, a good long while. And then when I was editing it, I cried again, every time. There was no vindictive glee in what I did, the way it really feels like there is when some writers fridge women. If you don't think Chet was well characterized, that's on me, but I assure you it wasn't for lack of intent. And I hope it's just one example writers can use to understand their characters need to be people, even if they are victims who only exist to develop the hero into a better person. So there you go, the first book I've written since the Restoration Project, and it culminates in a storyline I've been planning since Darkfire. It's all over now, right? All downhill from here? Ha! Not even close. The next 3 books also been planned for a long time. They'll take a while to produce, but I promise I'll try to make them worth the wait. And in the meantime, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. I hope I haven't hurt you too badly along the way. Thank you for everything you do to make my life epic. Here's to lots more epicness in the days and years to come. Garrett Robinson, July 2017. P.S. This is also the first book I've published since my dad passed away just a few weeks ago. He was a hell of a guy and one of my biggest and earliest fans. I read him an early draft a few days before the end. This book and every one I write hereafter is for him and my mom. Garrett, September 2017. Connect online. Epilogue. Damaris sat at her writing desk, penning a letter bound for the seat. Her room at the inn felt empty somehow. It was strange. Typo? Wait, where was the typo? Did I typo? I missed it. She had spent many years of her life without Gregor at her side. Why did this time feel different? Why did she feel his absence so keenly? Oh. She shook off such thoughts. It would not be long before he came to join her. Indeed, it was only his paranoia that had made him send her out of the city in the first place. The dear man wanted to take every precaution now that they knew this disturbing business about Lauren's dreams. Her quill paused on the parchment. Dreams of the future. It was a terrifying prospect, but also it seemed to her to be an incredible opportunity. What might she do if she could see what was to come? But the boy had told her the dreams came after Lauren met with elves, and Damaris was not so great a fool as to trifle with them in hopes they would give her the same gift. A tremor of fear ran through her as she thought of Gregor back in Danfon, alone. She shook her head. Fear was ridiculous. Knowledge of the future could not help Lauren. Eventually Gregor would figure out a way to draw her within reach. What good would foresight be then? At best it would show her just how Gregor would dismantle her piece by piece. Indeed, it seemed Lauren had dreamed of it already, if the boy was to be believed. And Damaris had used all her skill with the knife to ensure that, indeed, he could be believed. Sighing, Damaris stood from the desk and crossed the room to refill her wine. Foresight was a power indeed. Lauren was certainly misusing it, but it explained how she had always remained on Damaris's trail, always just one step behind her. What a myopic, uninspired use for such a gift. Damaris rolled a knot from her neck as she sipped her wine. Some things, sadly, could never be changed. That was a fact of the world that she had had to accept long ago. Lauren's great weakness was that she refused to accept it. Why, if Damaris acted the same way, her life would be spent in constant terror of the necromancer, and the thought pained her. She shied away. Never mind the necromancer. That thought must be stowed until she had devised a solution for it. A knock came at her door. Damaris paused. It was no attack, that much was certain. She had been fleeing across Dorsey fast enough that, even knowing where she was bound, Lauren would never be able to catch her. Gregor? But no, the knock was not heavy enough for that. Oh, thanks for the follow, Imagination Studio. Fair warning, the stream is going to be ending in just a few minutes. Enter. The door opened. A messenger came into the room, stopping for a deep bow. Good eve, my lady. Good eve, said Damaris. What is it? The messenger stopped. Her lips twitched, fighting for words. A tremor passed through Damaris's breast. Her fingers tightened on the stem of her goblet. What have you come to say? Spit it out. It is Gregor, my lady. He is dead. The goblet fell from Damaris's fingers and crashed to the floor, sending its wine to soak into the fine rug at her feet. My lady, said the messenger, leaping forwards to pick it up. I will fetch a... Silence, said Damaris. The messenger froze. Excuse me. Was it the girl? The woman's skin went a shade paler. She nodded. Thank you, said Damaris. That will be all. The messenger opened her mouth as if to say something else, but she thought better of it, turned, and left the room. Only then did Damaris let herself collapse into the chair by the writing desk. Gregor, her oldest friend, her closest companion. Theirs was the greatest love she had ever seen or heard tale about, not the love of those who share a bed, but of those who share their lives together, their every innermost thought. Indeed, he was worth more than every man she had taken to bed all put together. He had saved her life, had been there as she raised Annis, and now he was gone. She did not weep openly, but she could not stop the tears from slowly leaking. Her grip tightened on the back of the chair until her knuckles had gone very nearly white, and for the first time since she could remember, a feeling wrapped its deathly fingers around her heart, an emotion she was not at all familiar with, a pure, cold, unrelenting fear. Section 2. The dream took him. The girl in the cloak knelt over Gregor. She leaned down to whisper something in the giant's ear, but she spoke too softly to hear. The man in black could only watch as the girl leaned farther over, drawing her dagger across Gregor's throat. The giant's blood splashed across the carpet. It gave the man in black a sense of grim satisfaction. The girl in the cloak had succeeded where he had failed. The girl slowly stood and turned to him. Her eyes had that glow, akin to mage light and yet different. He had never seen anything like it before, and that was not something he could say for most things under the sky. The girl drew closer. The man tensed. He had not felt fear for a very long time, but he felt awareness, caution, his every sense strained, ready to react if she should attack him. I killed him, said the girl in the black cloak, but I will need to kill many more. Then do it, he said. No one can stop you. I'm not ready, said the girl in the black cloak. Not yet. Help me. He chuckled and shook his head. I am no nursemaid. Get someone else to draw the knife for you. Her green eyes pierced him, holding him in place. She lifted the dagger and pressed its point against his heart. The man did not like threats. The man liked to end threats, but he could not lift his hands to pull her away. The dream would not let him. Help me, she rasped. The dream released him. The man in black started awake in his bed. The dream sight passed almost at once. He took 2 deep breaths to calm himself, and it was gone. Gently he massaged his temples and then rolled his shoulders to relax them. Moon's light through the window. Still night. That was odd. The dreams did not often wake him before morning. Not any longer. He rose, drawing on his trousers and shirt and boots. He went to the door and opened it, stepping out onto the balcony beyond. Talib was there, standing guard in the shadows. He glanced at her and frowned. You should have gone. I do not need a caretaker. She arched an eyebrow at him. I did leave. I could not sleep. I came back. He snorted a brief laugh at that. How very like her. She was his best soldier, and he would hate to lose her, though he already knew he must. Has there been any news about what happened in Wellmont? None, she said, shaking her head, but then you asked very general questions. They will mean just the right things to the right people, he said. Just keep your ear out. We must learn what happened there before... He pinched the bridge of his nose. Before what? It was getting harder and harder to tell. Something was changing, accelerating, increasing the presence of the dream side in the waking world, leaving him more and more confused about what he had seen in true life and what in a dream. And it all had something to do with what had happened at Wellmont, but he still did not know what that was. Talib still watched him, waiting for him to finish speaking. She was one of the two whom he let see him this way. The boy had to see him as all-knowing, sardonic, and certain. But with Talib and one other, he felt he could let down his guard. In fact, he knew he must, or he would never get what he truly wanted. There's something else, he said. Someone else entering the equation. Oh, said Talib. Who? You have heard of the Nightblade? Talib snorted. A few whispered stories. Then that is an advantage, because she knows little enough of us. But she will. She is coming. Talib shot up straight in her chair. Here? To the seat? I do not know. He frowned as he realized it was true. He had never seen her in a location that he knew, only in Dorsey, but he could not be certain that that was where he would see her. I only know she is looking for me. And what do we care, said Talib. She is little more than a campfire tale. She cannot have done half the things they have said about her. She has not, but she has done other things that no one speaks of at all. Not yet, at any rate. Finally, Talib stood, coming to stand before him. Mako, I do not understand. What does she have to do with anything? Mako grinned, his teeth glinting in the moonlight. In truth, I do not know, but I very much look forward to finding out. Done book? Yeah, I'm pretty excited. It's alright, I guess. Not too bad, you know? It's alright. It's secret, Clundy man. Duh. Yes, I do. The answer to your question, find the time, is yes. Although I do hate the term self-publishing because it implies that one does everything oneself, which I used to do. I used to do my own covers. I used to do my own editing. And that is dumb and awful, and no one should do it. I do actually own a publishing company. I have multiple editors. I have professional cover artists. I have people who work for me and everything like that. So it's technically not really self-publishing, but like, I mean, I know that the answer to your question, like, it's not self-publishing, but it also is. What am I doing on my fucking iPad? Ah, yes. Yay! Hope you enjoy it, Twiggly Bits. My advice on getting fantastic covers is hiring fantastic cover artists and cover typographers. That's what I'd suggest. Look at that motherfucking... Oops. Look at that motherfucking map. It's so cool, I can't wait until people are reading the book and the map. I am not at the moment accepting manuscript submissions, find the time. And I'm not interested in publishing other people's stories. I am publishing other authors right now, but we're basically doing sort of the Marvel thing. So, in other words, all of the stories that Legacy Books is going to be publishing all take place in the world of Underrealm. And the stories are all sort of very closely interlinked and everything like that. So I've gone out and found authors who I've really wanted to work with and signed them to write books, but they're all taking place in the world. So we're not, if somebody has written a different fantasy series, that's their own thing. I fully believe that they should go publish that themselves. It's just not what our publishing company is doing. You want to be a cover artist and a typographer? Yes, this is an iPad mini, Erica, and it is glorious. I'm such a big fan. Why are you watching that LA Chargers game? Yeah, iPad mini for me is really just the perfect size. It's wonderful. Oh, that's awesome, Erica. Oh, I just search for a lot of work on DeviantArt. Find people who have available whose work I love and who have available contact information. Yeah. Reach out to them, tell them my what I can afford price wise, etc., etc. I have 3 separate artists and I have 1 typographer. Son of a bitch. Well, I can't do that one, but I can do a different one. Okay, I'm just putting the final book file online right now. And that's pretty boring since nothing's happening on the screen. So I'm just going to end the stream. Thanks, everybody, for being here for the end of the book. Woo! Very exciting. I didn't end the stream, did I? Said I was going to, and then I didn't. Okay, really ending the stream now. You guys are awesome. Thanks for being here at the end, and I will catch you next time. Bye!